People, you don't think I see you crying in your cars, but I do. Sometimes I can feel it at a red light, someone at my side trying to muddle through. See them wiping their eyes in their rear view, like black hole sun in the sky. Why the fuck won't you come when I need you? Well, this moment in time is as close as we'll be and as far as I'll meet you. Two windows in between us, new moon in the house of Venus. One stranger who sees you and reads your features knows that your alibi might be tight, but it's not quite leak-proof. So if you're sitting at the light and you're crying in your car, just know that I see you. And it's a 50-50 that I'm bloodshot, gun-shy, once bitten, twice tried, ribs pried wide to the sky till I'm see-through.
That's you, in case you don't recognize yourself.
You don't think I see you struggling to breathe, but I do. I see you stumble in your everyday grief like I do. I try, but I do. I'm twice bitten too. My mind's split in two. My knuckles bright white from the 10 to the 2. And the song in my head is the theme for a fugue. A state of decay through the filter of corporate news, where they edit the grays and the blues. They whitewash the brown till they drown out the natural hues. And then it's just another fact to refuse, that the corporate ladders for hanging the company noose. Consider it one of your perks, after all it's communal in use. So you can come and hang till your legs go limp and they're shaking you loose. Now you watch 5 co-workers opt for the alternate exit, neatly suspended above where you wolf down your food. And your company gets its incentives embellished by harping on wellness, suggesting you'd best take time for your mental health after your 14 hours are through. Like we gave you a bottle to piss in and fixed up a noose on the crossbeam. Christ, what more can we do? So if you struggle to breathe any moment that you aren't asleep, then remember, most of Americans fear for their savings, fear for their shelter, fear for their babies. You aren't the fringe of exception, but rather a perfect example of capital's rule. And you're far less alone than the ruling class tells you is true. You're far less alone than the ruling class tells you is true. I see you crying in your cars, but I do. SWAT team took your neighbor today. Watched them as they walked him away. You told yourself extremists come in all different shapes. Met his eyes and lowered your gaze. Is it too late for us to ever change? When we are collecting the dust of better days, they're always watching us, but we're never safe. We're not meant to be safe. not meant to escape. We aren't meant to wake. Sheriff stopped your daughter today. Pepper sprayed her twice in the face. He must have had good reason if he'd treat her that way. At least that's what they've taught you to say. But is it too late for us to ever change? Once we're collecting the dust of better days, they're always watching us, but we're never safe. We're not meant to feel safe, not meant to escape. We aren't meant to wake. Feds arrived and had you detained. Said you'd made some posts they want changed. Tased you till you felt like you'd forgotten your name, or life before they had you contained. Oh, life before they had you contained. SWAT team took your neighbor today. Maybe that's how it goes. We won't open our eyes, so we're the last ones to know. We're the last ones alive, kept our enemies close, wondered why we don't thrive, while we're grasping at ghosts, counting backwards from 5, counting backwards from 5, counting backwards from 5.
Count back from 5. The theater on fire, the cast on strike. The studio stock starts taking a dive. The contracts tossed and they're gone with the tide. And the heads and execs, their hands are tied. We can't pump this dreck and treat you right. But what do you expect from the industry type who survive by the leeching of bodies and minds? From those who original thoughts never seem to find. So they're gonna reboot ALF before your wages rise. And it gives cause to pause and reflect on the times. If they're losing control of their fools and their mimes, when all those obedient actors who grew their careers by averting their eyes are now holding the line, along with the authors of countless scripts that strengthen the hand of that corporate grip, squeezing our throats till we take the pen and we accept and consent to the corporate drip. Till you're all up to date on your pharma du jour, till you got a healthy support for the war on your lips. And now you know that the advertisers need more than a rerun summer full of flashback clips. Enter the scans from the year before, all the days of de-aging and mapping the face, and the hours of actors recording their voices are links in the chains that will bind
them. Who are these people?
Who are these people? Hi, everybody. We're back already. It's Tuesday night. This week flew by, I swear. And I did 3 shows, so it makes more sense, I guess, because I'm more of a flow. But it doesn't feel like an entire week since I did this show last. Good to see everyone. I see some people are already over there in chat. Steve Gill. We're over live on Substack. That's now working and going. We're on 9 different platforms. This is IndieNewsNow Live, for those who are listening. I'm Indy, because people can't see my face, my little thing bouncing around. But you can hear my voice. So hi, everyone. Hi, Lady Alex M. Good to see everyone. Okay. I got a long show. I got a lot for tonight. I wanted to first talk about an activist, or I mean, I wouldn't even call her an activist, but she's been turned into an activist because she lost her job over her activism, but she was on the flotilla. I mean, she's an activist. She's somebody who feels very passionately about freeing Palestine and about exposing Zionism and countering the scourge that is Zionism, the murderous ideology that has manifested in so many different places and now caused a mass takeover of most of our media and land theft. We're going to talk about Lebanon tonight and what they're doing in Lebanon, which is not the first time by any stretch that we're doing that. So we got to keep talking about Lebanon because now there was a memorandum of understanding signed about some kind of way forward, but I don't see what Lebanon actually gets out of the deal that they signed, which is okay, other than maybe the bombs stopping, maybe, which we know that there's only a matter of time before they'll start dropping them again. Then there's what's happening in Gaza. I didn't even talk about anything having to do with Iran this week. But now the ethnic cleansing plan for Gaza is moving forward. They're talking about building settlements, and I'm going to get into that later. And then we're going to talk about the earthquake in Venezuela, the Ring of Fire series of earthquakes, and apparently there was yet another one today in California. There's a lot of seismic activity happening underground right now. A lot of conspiracy theorists seem to believe that it is being orchestrated by somebody. I don't know if I believe that. I don't know. I think that, a lot of places have been sitting on a lot of shifting plates for a long time that haven't shifted. And now you have world wars and bombs being dropped and things happening all over the place. Could it certainly invite more tectonic activity? Certainly. Are there machines that can alter this? Yes. Why they would want to cause an earthquake in certain places, I have no idea, because you have no idea how that's going to end up playing out in the end. So I don't think anybody actually is inviting the potential for an earthquake. I just, even if there are weather manipulation, sound manipulation, whatever it is, I never thought that it was actually the intent to cause that and to cause massive destruction and death worldwide. They're in to a large concentrated area. And don't forget the fact that country, Venezuela, is sanctioned. So that makes it even more difficult to get aid in and out. And their leader was effectively kidnapped in January. So they have an acting president, but the acting president isn't the person that was chosen by the people. They were installed by Trump and are working alongside the Trump administration. And, now the rumor, not the rumor, but the narrative that's going in is it's only Israel that's going to help, which is A, not true. And B, maybe it's because of the sanctions that they're not letting anybody else deliver any kind of aid, because they weren't letting them deliver aid before the earthquakes, remember. All right. Alex Saab literally went to prison, the diplomat, for trying to get aid for the Venezuelan people. So a lot of people forget a lot of this stuff. And I know I'm just kind of ranting and getting myself into stuff a little bit. So before we get started, support independent media because we need it more than ever. All those people already have. Just about all of them are up there on that board right now or in chat. I love you all. Okay. Cash App, $, Indie News Network. If you do ko-fi.com/Indie News Network, you can pop a message up on screen while I'm live. At paypal.me/Indie News Network. Patreon.com/Indie News Network for the monthly. And then Substack, we're live at IndieMediaToday.com. Also a member of INN, that's Indie News Network. See that logo up in the corner. I also help publish the newsletter there every Friday at 5:45 Eastern. It's a recap of everybody's articles, video clips, live streams for the entire week across the entire network. And then IndieNewsNow.com. That's the name of the show, is Indie News Now Live, because a lot of the articles, a lot of the content that you're going to see tonight, you're able to link to. And I found originally by going to IndieNewsNow.com and scrolling through the pages to look for, or just keep doing the infinite scroll to look for content for every show. And I do this every week. It's over 100 sources, ad-free, and it just keeps loading more and more and more articles from nothing but trusted sources. So I built that for everybody else for free. IndieNewsNow.com. Go check it out. Subscribe there, bookmark it, and go make it your homepage, because every time you come back, it'll look different. All right. So I would like to get to this lady. I don't know how many of you have heard of her. Her name is Jennifer Koonings. Okay, and I know I'm not showing this yet. I'm refreshing and I'm bringing up the video because thanks to the lovely Instagram.
I am being investigated by the American Nurses Credentialing Center over allegations that I engaged in targeted, aggressive harassment towards individuals based on perceived national origin, making me in violation of their code of conduct in that I acted in a manner unbecoming to the nursing profession. I'm not gonna lie, opening this letter to read that my nurse practitioner board certification may well be suspended or revoked, rendering me essentially unable to practice, and I started laughing. I started laughing because this, to me, means that Zionists are down so bad that teaching me a lesson is still on the agenda. Jokes aside, though, these allegations against me are just wrong. I didn't make any assumptions about where these individuals were from. They told me they were from Israel, the entity occupying Palestine and currently committing a genocide, as confirmed by every reputable human rights organization, physicians, along with the UN. And after learning of their national origin, I asked them, were you guys in the IOF?
IDF.
The IOF. You were in the IOF?
IDF.
I wanted to give them an opportunity to denounce the genocide or state that they refused to participate in the genocide before I assumed a reasonable assumption, given that military service in Israel is obligatory. I asked these individuals, how many babies did you kill?
How many women did you rape?
You didn't kill babies?
How many children did you rape?
And despite this line of questioning, along with the fact that Israel is committing a Holocaust in Palestine and has turned Gaza into a mass grave, that Israeli security forces regularly killed babies, committing infanticide, as well as systematically rape and torture Palestinian hostages, the individual on the right states,
What they say?
I've run my country. Really proud.
and as I left, this individual shouted at me,
God. Why are they all the same?
I'd kill them again? So you're saying that you killed them, Palestinians, and you want to do it again. Sounds like a war criminal to me. And the individual on the left,
The entire world fucking is talking about.
sure looks like he directly participated in the brutal military occupation of Palestine. I deny the claims made by the ANCC that my actions were targeted or aggressive. I did not engage in any aggressive or physical behavior. I did not touch these individuals. I only used my words. Fuck Israel! Fuck Israel until the day I die! I also reject the claims made by the ANCC that I engaged in conduct unbecoming to the nursing profession. Conduct unbecoming to the nursing profession is supporting genocide and participants of said genocide. I have been the subject of a targeted doxing and smear campaign by StopAntisemitism.org and others, and I believe that these actions by the ANCC are a continuation of that retaliation against me for my anti-genocide stance. So yes, that's right. They are working on stripping me of my board certification and nurse practitioner license, all because I do not support genocide. Okay. Well, I already told you guys that it doesn't matter what you do to me. It's not going to change the truth. And you will never get me to take back anything that I said.
Hardcore, totally with her. I don't have any problem with anything she said. She asked she was respectful, somewhat. I mean, considering who she's talking to, they're in her city. War criminals sitting in New York City, openly admitting and proudly, bragging about the fact that they killed people and would kill them again. I probably would have said the same thing that they did. And maybe because I'm a man, it might have even become a physical confrontation. But these guys are in another country. They know to behave at this point. And they know that they've already done the worst thing that you could possibly do. So there's nothing that they could do at this point that would be worse. Now, I was going to point out again, she mentioned that she was being targeted by Stop Anti-Semitism. That was just 3 months ago. She's literally named here as the anti-Semite of the week. We know that our friend Gen X Girl 1994 was also targeted by this organization, as have a lot of other Guy Christensen, a lot of other people who have spoken out against the genocide. Jennifer, that she's literally, it's cost her her job. She's been publicly outed and doxxed. And anyone who's an Israel supporter, they've been smearing her amongst their own community and sharing her name and her picture to try to ruin her life, her reputation, and stop her from potentially being able to get another job. They're now looking to strip her of her board certification. She's a licensed nurse. Like, she went to school for this. She takes care of patients. I'm sure they would say, well, what happens if she treats a Zionist or somebody with an Israel flag? Yeah, anti-Zionists don't behave that way. That's how Zionists behave, which is why they're asking the question in the first place, because a Hippocratic oath says you treat the patient regardless of whom. Dr. Mark Perlmutter, who's the other one that I just had on, I showed his video a couple of weeks ago. Follow me for more horrible shit. So big, I like what she's doing. There's another video that she put out the other day. This is called, Is This the Biggest Flex Yet? She said she has lawyered up. So let's see what's going on here. More about attacking her licensing.
Whatever's going to happen, like whatever. I'm prepared for whatever's going to happen, like whatever. Obviously, the cards are stacked against me. They're stacked against all of us. It doesn't mean I'm not going to fight for this and fight for what's right. But even if they do manage to take this from me, and obviously whatever investigation or processes they have, it's not fair. It's completely biased. They have already made up their mind about me and what's going to happen. I'm sure of it. But if they did take my board certification and my license, like I don't know. I think like immediately I would like flex that like they're so like obsessed with me. Like, you guys don't have anything else more important on the agenda aside for coming after someone whose story nobody's even talking about anymore, because that was like 3 months ago at this point. Like, it's the news cycle has came and went like thousands of times by now. Like, it's so like springtime, and you're going to put it in the news again. You're going to make me an even bigger deal. You're going to, if you take my license and my board certification, I think that's going to be the first time in the US that would happen to a provider, like regarding Palestine. So I think that would be a pretty big flex, actually.
It might be a pretty big flex, but it's really pretty big fucked up. And they don't forget. They don't just move on. They sit and they wait, and they have the money and the time and the resources to kind of wait you out. And the minute that you breathe and that you sit down and you rest, they're going to pounce and they're going to come after you with everything they have. And it sucks, because all she's doing is speaking out against people who are murdering babies with U.S. bombs, our tax money, quote unquote, sorry MMTers, but it's U.S. tax dollars that most of us don't approve of being used to destroy entire areas of the world, murder people that didn't do anything to deserve that whatsoever. Not that, I mean, and these are the people that end up punished. All right, just like what we're going to see later with the prairie land people. Okay, here now let's go back. This is her Instagram page. Okay, at _ Jennifer Kings. So go follow her over here. There's a bunch of videos. She actually just recently did a video with Mint Press News. She's been published in Covert Action magazine in the past. She's now been pushed out to where we are, the fringes. Nobody else wants to actually, she is inconvenient to the narrative. A American, well-spoken healthcare provider who is vehemently against what Israel has been doing. Okay, terminated from her sexual assault forensic examiner position due to her anti-genocide stance. Now, I believe she worked for Mount Sinai Hospital. Of all places you're going to go work, I don't know if I would necessarily think that a hospital named after, a biblical place like that would be necessarily where I would go. Here is the targeting by Stop Anti-Semitism. You can see there, that is a tweet where they made from her video where she was interviewing IDF soldiers in Times Square. I mean, they're there. She's perfectly within her rights to ask them questions. All right, here's her asking other, doing a man on the street react. Right, so she's been doing reporting, which partly has to happen because they've taken her job. She has no other source of income now. And now what they're going to end up doing, I'm guessing, is demonetizing her stuff over hate speech or insensitive, whatever you want to call it, triggering words. And, I feel for this woman, really, because I can't even imagine what it must be like to have the entire lobby come at you with the full force and try to ruin your life. Now, recently, also, there was a whole hubbub just before the last primary election where the current representative, Dan Goldman from Goldman Sachs, he was running against another Zionist, but someone who had spoken out against the genocide, Brad Lander, and Goldman went to some coffee shop, Poetica in Brooklyn, and they basically said, we don't want to serve Zionists here. And he used it as, oh, well, you just hate Jews. But that, of course, wasn't the problem. The problem was genocide supporters. They don't want to serve known genocide funders and supporters like the congressman that is a vehement rabid Israel supporter. That's what's going on. So then they tried to use that as a wedge. She went there to basically prove that they were not against Jews whatsoever. Again, that was a video that happened a couple of weeks ago, 5 days ago.
For an answer. It's very rapey. Always. Always.
Right over here.
You guys you don't know how to take no for an answer. Yeah.
I don't.
I don't, he says.
I don't. I want to buy coffee.
She just went in to get a drink of coffee.
Oh. Okay, so this is Poetica Coffee Shop. They are being investigated by the Justice Department, Civil Rights Investigation. And the Zionists in New York City are accusing them of being anti-Semitic, all because they returned $9.50 to Representative Dan Goldman. But come support this coffee shop. It is really good coffee, and they don't support baby killers, so we got to support them. They don't want to serve to you. They don't want to serve to you. No, they don't. It's a private business. This is how Zionists are. They don't take no for an answer.
Unbelievable. No, they don't take no for an answer. And if you try to tell them no, then they'll bomb your house, take your house. She's actually done an entire story. I know some other people have talked about it also, about this stuff, how the Zionists are trying to steal homes from people who've owned homes for years. They go and they write a new deed or a title that says that they now own the home, and they get the cops to actually evict people from the home that they've lived in for decades, even though they never actually completed a transaction to sell it. But by paperwork, they've now lost their home. I know Sabby, I believe, did a whole thing about this. So go follow this woman again, _ Jennifer Kings. I like what she's been saying. I can't promise she's always going to get it right, of course. Now let's also remember that, look, she's being targeted, and that all over the world, remember that people are conspiring to make sure that she does not ever have another job. If she loses her board certification as a nurse, that certain things are going to necessarily not be available to her, or doors that will not be open to her, specifically because of her position on Israel and Palestine. All right. And part of that is a network of Mossad's secret allies or helpers face up that there too. They call the Sayanim. I read this article 2 years ago. This was put out on June 30th, 2 years ago today. Okay. We did a live stream where we talked about the Sayanim, and these are the Mossad's helpers, influential business people all over the world that Israel and the Mossad leverage at certain times, and when it's important, to do their bidding on their behalf. People that they have had kind of put in place, almost like a Hydra, if you want to refer to it, looking at it in Avengers terms. All right. But yeah, so you can find that on Indie Media Today. And if you just search the word Mossad or Sayanim, Sayanim, all right, you can find that there. I think if you even search the word helpers, because it searches all the text in all the posts, it'll actually find it. Yeah, you know what? Let me do that. Let me search helpers. You go to IndieMediaToday.com. Look at that. The first thing that comes up are the first two entries. So you can just find it by going to IndieMediaToday.com and search helpers. It's also this clip is also at Indie Media, INN's YouTube channel. So I wanted to point out that we've been talking about how Israel has been targeting activists to try to ruin their lives, to get them debanked, to get their jobs, get them terminated from their jobs, stop them from being hired for new jobs. They are vicious, ruthless, and then they turn around and say, well, what do you mean? They play the victim. Well, how can you play the victim when you are that kind of level of aggressor? It's duplicitous. But what else are you going to say? Okay. That was an interesting piece. Again, it's a great story. YouTube isn't the place for it. I agree. Oh, okay. Oh, that's literally saying that he got arrested for being double parked. All right. You need empathy for some jobs like nursing or teaching, where listening and understanding are kind of important, but our system is about checking boxes properly. Agreed. All right. And yeah. So I feel bad for this lady. She knew what she was getting into when she started advocating for Palestinians, but these are patients. These are people. And Hippocratic Oath says, do no harm. So as a nurse, shouldn't she be advocating for not bombing children? And shouldn't the opposite be the people that end up being prosecuted? I mean, I covered the British doctor who said that he wouldn't treat a Palestinian person, and that he still got his license. Dr. Rameh Adwan, who's been sanctioned 9 times, and had her license suspended multiple times in the UK over very similar stuff. That's why I'm worried about what's going to happen to Jennifer. Right. They're targeting journalists. They're targeting women. They're targeting children in Lebanon too. Right. Do you think they're going to stop at making sure that healthcare providers that advocate for Palestinian life are going to continue to be able to practice, without, I hope they should be, but it seems that there is a concerted effort to try to stop this from happening, which is horrifying and terrible. Hello to everybody over on Substack. Good to see you all. Again, support independent media because we need it more than ever. Support people like Jennifer. If you search her name, if you Google Jennifer Koonings' name, Koonings, all you will see on the first multiple pages of Google are smear campaigns against her, calling her an anti-Semite, calling her saying what she was doing was hate speech. It's horrifying when you have this level of campaign from corporate media trying to drag your name through the mud. Like, I was just trying to see, is she on Twitter? I couldn't even find a link to a profile of hers in 3 pages. She's on Instagram. She's also on Upscrolled, for those of you who are on Upscrolled. She's not very active on there, but she does have an account. Her main account seems to be Instagram, and then she also has a YouTube. So follow her over there. Again, support independent media. Jennifer has to be independent because corporate media is certainly not giving her a fair shake. All right. The people who've already done that have supported INN. I really appreciate that. Ways to do that: Cash App, $ Indie News Network, code-fee.com/Indie News Network, paypal.me/Indie News Network. Do that as friends and family. At patreon.com/Indie News Network for monthlies. Substack.com. You can do that at Indie Media Today on Substack or at INNnewsletter.com, also on Substack. Either one you can do monthly or annually. Finally, we've got IndieNewsNow.com. It's the name of the show. That's because it's also the name of a news aggregator website that I built that brings in RSS feeds 24/7 from over 100 different providers, including Middle East Monitor and Anti-War News and, I'm blanking, The Dissident and Rania Kalik. And I'm just looking at tonight's lineup, the Brockovich Report and Sludge, all of these different incredible outlets, Arturo Dominguez at Decolonized Journalism, Dissent in Bloom. You'll find all of their articles whenever they're published, immediately a link to them at IndieNewsNow.com. So again, bookmark that and make sure that's your homepage. So whenever you load up a new browser, you get to see it and you get to see what the latest news is. All right. I broke up tonight's Fuck Israel segment. I mean, technically that was the beginning of it because Israel is what's causing. Hey, Anti-War is .com original. Check that out. Welcome, Anti. I love you guys. You guys are the best. Indie Media Award honoree, antiwar.com. What an honor to have you guys at our stream. We love you guys. You're Mount Rushmore, best of the best of the best. One of the outlets that I rely on the most, and not just me, but all of the INN shows for, accurate, kind of down the middle content, matter-of-factly reporting on what's actually happening without the pro-Israel corporate media spin. And today that's so rare to find. And it's, I deeply appreciate everybody over there, from Scott Horton to Dave DeCamp, Kyle Anzalone, Jason Ditz, and our friend Angela Keaton, who runs the Anti-War News account. I love everybody over there. They're just what an outstanding group of people, really. Okay. Before I get to Fuck Israel segment, I did break it up into multiples. So the first one was about Jennifer. Then we're going to get to in a little bit. We'll get to talking about Gaza, and we're going to get to talk about Lebanon. But first, I almost forgot. I did want to talk about Venezuela and the earthquakes. So the first thing is this happened on Sunday, right? The 25th was Thursday. 6 powerful earthquakes happened in less than 24 hours. All right. And new continent release coming soon. That's funny. But 6-9, 5-6, 7-2, 7-5, back to back in Venezuela. And let's not forget that in the Philippines and in New Guinea, this is called the Ring of Fire, which I am learning all about. But these are all on tectonic plate lines that have been expected to be shifting. And, people have been talking about the big one in California my entire life, that it hasn't happened. Is it now because of all of the bombs that are being dropped elsewhere around the world, is that affecting the Earth at its core and shaking the vibrational stuff of the planet that's then moving those plates enough that they're causing it? I don't know. I don't. And I'm not a geologist. I'm not a seismic geologist. And I don't want to speculate about it. But what I did want to do was point out that you did have 6 earthquakes in a 24-hour period of at least a 4.9 Richter scale of seismic activity, which is unusual to say the least. All right. And what we're going to talk about are the 2 that hit Venezuela, because they were really bad for Venezuela. Old Man Barker, a lot of people do feel that way. I personally do not, because there's a lot of good people in California I would not want to lose. I get it. But no, don't let California fall into the ocean, please. There's a lot of good people in California I don't want to lose. Stargazer Steph, how are you? Welcome back. Welcome to the stream. How are you? You're over on Twitch right now, it looks like. Cool. So, yes, we are live over on Twitch. Good. Echo, echo, echo. Is there an echo? I hope not. Maybe you've got me open in 2 browsers, or do I have me open in 2 browsers? Nobody told me I'm echoing. So, we got people over on Rumble. I see Naybones is over there. What's up? I saw Nature Boy's over there. Nature Boy does a live stream every Friday night on his channel, Rumble, on the AM Wake Up channel as well. He does interesting interviews with some people. I was on there last year. Okay, so getting back to the earthquakes, Venezuela, holy crap. So what happened in Venezuela? So the first thing is I do want to mention, and I like this woman, Camila Escalante. She's with Costa News, I believe now. She's on the ground. So she said that the stories out of La Guaira are inconceivable. There are ways of responsibly informing and utilizing social media. Many people will use their platforms for careless dissemination of false information and reckless destructive takes. It's not just analysis and opinion. In the Anglosphere, it's easy to speak without realizing you're contributing to larger engineered information operations, which is why I'm going to be very careful about what I share tonight. Members of the Venezuelan military and their families find themselves victims of the earthquake and are among the dead. State and government employees and their families are among the missing and dead. Everyone is affected. It's a critical and sensitive time. Some headlines are just flat out fake. Abandoned children in Parque del Este, tsunami warnings, claims about the condition of the viaduct, claims that the Bolivarian government impedes the entry of supplies to La Guaira, all false. There's never been a better time to evaluate whether information is official and consider what potential future scenarios one might be contributing to with the replicating of unverified information. Contributing to widespread panic, outrage, and division is particularly dangerous and could cost more lives in the end. Venezuelans are acutely aware that los mismos helicópteros que se llevaron a Maduro, okay, that's the same helicopters that took Maduro, ahora mismo están en Maiqueta bringing aid to and their call remnants to lift the economic blockade. Their call remains to lift the economic blockade, meaning that now are the same helicopters in Maqueta bringing aid, and again, the call remains of Venezuelans to lift the economic blockade. In countries like the U.S. and Canada, people and organizations should fight against the ongoing violence and coercion the U.S. has imposed on Venezuela before and since January 3rd, when they kidnapped Maduro, and take action against the economic blockade imposed on Venezuela by the U.S. and its allies, which caused over 100,000 deaths in Venezuela for years prior to these earthquakes. The demonic imperialist enemy of humanity remains the same and must be stopped. This reminds me again of the article I read last week from BetBeat Media, got put out as its own individual clip yesterday on Indie Media Today, which is that it's not the Jews, it's imperialism. It's the face of imperialism, which changes faces throughout history, but it's the same messaging throughout time. It's power. Power beating up the powerless, stealing from the powerless. And be careful of spreading misinformation because you may be doing the bidding of the powerful without intending to do so by spreading stuff that they want put out there but isn't true or accurate. So, someone who I do trust to get it right and to not spread misinformation, Alan McLeod. More than 1,400 people are confirmed killed by the earthquakes already, with tens of thousands of more still not accounted for. Again, that was 3 days after the earthquake happened. Earthquake happened on the 25th. This is on June 28th in the middle of the afternoon. The U.S. has over 900 sanctions in force against Venezuela, greatly hindering relief efforts. All true. Buildings fallen over, toppled, collapsed. There it is from like a drone overhead shot, and you can see just the amount of destruction. The amount of buildings that were knocked down there and partial collapse there. I mean, all this stuff is going to that's going to need heavy equipment to come in and knock stuff down, reinforce, and rebuild. That's going to take a ton money, resources, and I'm sure the billionaires that donate to the Trump administration are licking their chops right now because this is all waterfront property. Take a look. Beautiful beaches and waterfront. This is very valuable property. All right. Here, Starlink Mobile providing free connectivity to customers in La Guaira region. They do this partly because of surveillance. They then get to monitor all of the activity, all the internet activity that's coming out of the country. Yes, Laura Moreno over on Substack looks like Gaza. Only actually there's buildings standing, so not quite. But yes, but this is not the result of bombs. This is the result of an earthquake. This is a natural disaster. How natural is a lot to be questioned. So now when I wanted to read like kind of from the lefty perspective, what's going on here. So I went to one of the outlets that I trust the most, which is Left Voice, another Indie Media Award honoree for outstanding coverage. This is from La Izquierda Diario. Okay. Otto Fors. I've brought a lot of his articles over the last 4 or 5 years to my shows. I trust his reporting, and his analysis here is again that earthquakes in Venezuela show the consequences of state neglect, social inequality, and imperialism. Now, this is not necessarily the most fluffy towards Maduro either. The Trots were not such a big fan of Chavism. But what it says is back-to-back earthquakes in northern Venezuela have caused hundreds of deaths and devastation, now over 1,000. They've also revealed the consequences of state neglect, social inequality, and imperialism. So, what do we mean here? Look at that. God. One of my absolute nightmares is to be in a building when it's falling over. I think there's a movie, San Andreas with The Rock, where he's in a movie where he's literally in a building as it's toppling over. That is like my absolute like nightmare. So 2 powerful earthquakes hit northern Venezuela on June 24th. That was 6 days ago, causing hundreds of deaths and thousands of injuries. Neighborhoods, including in Caracas, have been left in ruins. While Venezuelans try to recover from this natural disaster, one thing is clear. Their plight is made far worse by the years of economic and social crises, as well as imperialism. The impact of the earthquake is concentrated in decaying working-class neighborhoods plagued by these precarious living conditions where people have less capacity to evacuate and face greater hurdles to rebuilding their lives. While acting President Delcy Rodriguez has mobilized state resources to help the recovery effort, the past 2 days have revealed the severe limits of this response. Government teams have yet to reach many areas still, and some volunteers have resorted to working with their bare hands to help dig victims out from under the rubble. Hospitals, meanwhile, are overwhelmed. And I'll go back to Laura Moreno's comment over on Substack, looks like Gaza. These conditions are the predictable outcome of years of state neglect and social inequality, which have left 2/3 of the people in Venezuela living in poverty and precarity, with poor access to basic services like healthcare. While many in the United States see this as a consequence of socialism, the truth is that Venezuela was never really socialist. Even under Hugo Chavez and Nicolas Maduro, the country remained capitalist. Venezuela has never expropriated the national bourgeoisie, and it has a large private sector, aided by Maduro's deals with dozens of foreign multinationals to sell off energy assets. Again, that was happening before they kidnapped him. As profits from the oil industry in particular kept bankers and businessmen wealthy, the Venezuelan masses received limited benefits via social programs. But as this wealth dried up, the government could offer nothing to the country's working class and poor besides economic and social crises, because they leveraged the national they gave away the natural resources. But the crises facing Venezuelans today cannot be left at the feet of Chavez, Maduro, or even the Rodriguez administrations alone. Imperialism has always played a devastating role. God, I'm hearing a theme. For years, the United States in particular has imposed crippling sanctions, which have hit Venezuela's working masses the hardest. As we've written before, quote, sanctions are a tool of economic warfare. They have deadly consequences for the working class and poor, including in Venezuela, who suffer from shortages of food, fuel, and medicine. As part of its campaign domination against Venezuela since January 3rd, and President Trump's neo-colonial offensive, the Don Roe Doctrine, the U.S. has tightened these sanctions. You'd have thought now that he's named himself basically acting president of Venezuela, he would take care of the people. No, not just the opposite. In this sense, discussions about rescue and reconstruction following this earthquake cannot be separated from the fight against imperialism in the region. After all, far from being a neutral mechanism of solidarity, humanitarian aid can also be used as a tool for political coercion. Now rumors today that the Clinton Foundation, the Clinton Global Initiative, is now working to restore stuff down in Venezuela. Sounds a lot like Haiti 2010, where they ended up getting billions of dollars in U.S. government money, but Haiti never got rebuilt. Nor can we overlook the importance of independent self-organization of the Venezuelan masses, who now must both fight the Rodriguez government's subordination to international imperialist interests and demand that the cost of reconstruction not fall on those already bearing the brunt of Venezuela's crises. I don't know who else it's supposed to fall on other than maybe an IMF loan, which is what the rest of the world wants. A World Bank IMF loan. Then that puts the country in debt, and the resources then become part of the billionaire class. Rather, emergency resources must be allocated toward the urgent needs of the working class and poor. That's a nice sentiment, but never going to happen. As our comrades of the League of Workers for Socialism declare, quote, in the face of this tragedy, solidarity with the affected working families and the Venezuelan people is essential. Immediate aid is indispensable for rescue efforts, treating the injured, and supporting those who've lost everything. But alongside this urgent response, it is necessary to open a discussion about the social conditions that transform a natural phenomenon into a major catastrophe for the working class, and about how reconstruction will be organized in the coming days, months, and even years in a country that's endured more than a decade of economic crisis, deteriorating public services, and the impact of U.S. blockade and sanctions. Unquote. I'm sure that Jared Kushner and his buddies are, again, licking their chops to get at the reconstruction projects. So that was a really good article by Otto Fors that lays out at a very high level kind of what this is. Now, there's a couple of more details in this World Socialist website article. I was not such a fan of this because I think it jumps around a little bit. All right, but it also does the same thing in blaming imperialism. All right, this was published 2 days ago. There's another image of people, community workers all working together to try to get people out of collapsed buildings and then handing victims from person to person to person a line of, because they don't have ambulances, stretchers. It looks like they're very limited in what they have available to them. Right. So I'll read the first couple of paragraphs and then I want to read the end of this and then comment. But the double earthquakes that struck Venezuela on June 24th have exposed a massive crime by U.S. imperialism. 6 months ago, the U.S. invaded the country, abducted its president, and reduced his government to a puppet of Washington to see the toil. Having occupied Venezuela and declared itself the power directing policies there, Washington now bears direct responsibility for the catastrophe and for the criminal refusal to answer it. The invasion, the removal of Maduro, and the chaos and disorganization into which they've now thrown the country are a major factor in the catastrophic response to the earthquake. Would the response efforts have been different had Maduro been there as president and orchestrated this and led this? My guess would have been yes. How much different? I'm not sure. He would have been much more publicly asking for help from the international community. I haven't really heard Delcy Rodriguez doing that, but I haven't really been paying that close attention. Again, this followed years of economic sabotage that already crippled the country's hospitals, power grid, and ability to support the most basic supplies. Trump admin has exploited the disaster to deepen its control over Venezuela, sending warships, transport planes, and troops to take over the airport while families dig through concrete with their bare hands. Why are they taking over the airport? By Sunday, the confirmed death toll had risen to 1,430, and the UN Humanitarian Office cited unconfirmed reports that up to 50,000 people may be missing. An analysis of satellite images published by El País found that the destruction follows precisely on the line of the San Sebastian Fault, from Katia Lamar through La Guaira and the international airport to La Carabaleda, right? A densely populated coastal corridor. Decades of warnings about a catastrophic seismic hazard and the need to rebuild or reinforce buildings according to Northern engineering standards went entirely unheeded. So this is why they're blaming even the Maduro administration. Though they were hampered by sanctions, they still were getting capitalistic money from Chevron and other organizations that didn't have sanctions imposed upon it. Were all of those profits taken to be given back to the people? I don't know. I don't believe so. But that would be speculation on my part. 4 days after the earthquake, families are still digging through reinforced concrete with machetes, crowbars, hydraulic car jacks, and bare hands. Rescuers report hearing children crying beneath the rubble until the sounds stop amid the unbearable smell of corpses. Child survivors arrive at hospitals alone, identified only by adhesive tape with their names on their wrists, while hospitals and morgues overflow with victims. Again, like I saw that comment earlier and I put up from Laura, looks like Gaza. Or like Gaza did initially after they started bombing, initially. No machinery has arrived, nothing. We're without power, without water. The apartment blocks have begged to be evacuated because the damage is so severe. Nobody's come to tell us anything about shelter. Here, everything is up to the neighbors. Among those presumed dead are an entire flight load of deportees who arrived on a plane from the United States the morning of the quakes. Of the 147 sent back on the flight, only 12 survivors were found after their hotel collapsed. That's a story I haven't heard anywhere, by the way. The thousands who've died are not merely victims of a natural catastrophe. The decrepit state of Venezuela's housing stock, the collapse of its healthcare system, the degradation of its electrical grid, and the incapacity of the state to organize any meaningful emergency response are the product of the semi-colonial oppression of Venezuela by U.S. imperialism that goes back more than 100 years to 1902, 1903. And again, this is a long delve into the history. All right. She then gets into Hugo Chavez, which provoked mounting hostility. I'm going to skip down. All of this culminated in the events of January 3rd, 2026, when the Trump admin dispatched special forces to abduct President Maduro in what amounted to an unprovoked war of aggression to gain control over oil and key minerals. Unprovoked. He did not attack anyone. A reminder, just like Iran did not attack anyone. In the 6 months since, Venezuela has been transformed into a semi-colonial protectorate under the so-called Trump corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. Again, the Donroe Doctrine. This is the Shield of America stuff that Kristi Noem is in charge of, believe it or not. Laws rammed through the Chavista-led National Assembly have surrendered the world's largest proven oil reserves and major gold deposits to Washington and its corporate partners. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said publicly, quote, "The United States is directing policies in Venezuela at the moment," unquote. So how can it not be responsible for all the relief efforts? The collapse of dozens of buildings on June 24th and the wholly inadequate emergency response can only be explained by this century of semi-colonial oppression. While selfless rescue teams from the U.S. and other countries will save lives, Washington has primarily sent a military invading force. 2 U.S. warships, the Fort Lauderdale and Billings, are deployed in Venezuelan waters, not to help, but to blockade people from bringing help. 5 C-17 Globemaster transport aircraft are ferrying a contingency response element to take over management of Simón Bolívar International Airport from Venezuelan aviation authorities. Why? So that they can manage the military air traffic that's coming in and out, and now they're using it as their own military airbase. MV-22 Ospreys, UH-1Y Super Huey helicopters, and Army CH-47 Chinooks pre-staged on Curacao complete the picture. So now they're just using the entire country as a military base. This military footprint is entirely consistent with the operations that Washington and the government, headed by the U.S. puppet acting President Delcy Rodriguez, have already been conducting jointly in Venezuela's interior. U.S. and Venezuelan forces have bombed and swept through the gold and coltan mining zones of the Orinoco Arc to clear informal miners and secure control by the mining transnationals. Operations that included the extrajudicial killing of Hector Guerrero Flores, the alleged Tren de Aragua leader. You mean the organization that never really existed? Late Thursday, Major General Kevin J. Girard of the U.S. Marine Corps arrived in Caracas to direct Southcom's operations and become the de facto colonial administrator. Rodriguez, in turn, appointed Major General Juan Ernesto Zulbarán Quintero of the Bolivarian National Guard as sole authority for the emergency. So now you got 2 guys that are basically running the country, and she's not one of the people. The disaster zone, covering the Caracas metropolitan and surrounding areas, is under military command 6 months after a U.S. invasion. Again, the parallel with the Haiti earthquake in 2010 is chilling. Then, Washington exploited a catastrophic earthquake to deploy 20,000 troops, seize control of the Port-au-Prince airport, and impose direct military administration over a country it had dominated for a century. Relief planes from Doctors Without Borders carrying desperately needed medical equipment were turned away from the U.S.-controlled airport while patients died. The mission wasn't rescue, it was occupation. That, again, was 2010 Haiti. And the Clinton Global Initiative was the only organization that was allowed to bring relief in. The political analyst Ricardo Rios of the Caracas consultancy firm Poder e Estrategia stated what bourgeois commentators rarely acknowledge so plainly. The earthquake is, quote, going to be very well exploited to increase the presence for the United States and its control over Venezuela, and also for Rodriguez to lean on the United States as her primary ally, which is exactly what they want. That's exactly where they want Venezuela. Trump himself provided the most revealing statement of colonial arrogance. In a speech following the earthquake, the would-be U.S. Führer declared, quote, Venezuela's been fantastic. We have a great relationship, right? It was a one-day war. We hit them so hard, and now we've taken out millions of barrels of oil, millions of barrels, and we've paid for the war many times over. It's a happy country again. Jesus Christ. Really? A happy country again. Okay. The people are happy. They're dancing in the streets. No, they're protesting in the streets, you idiot.
Thank you very much. That's really nice. Thank you.
Prior to the U.S. invasion, Venezuela's economy had contracted by roughly 80% in a decade. They're dancing in the streets, driving more than 8 million people to flee the country and leading to all of the deportations on top of it. The sanctions regime maintained across Democratic and Republican administrations alike killed far more Venezuelans through deliberate economic deprivation and set the stage for the disaster following Wednesday's earthquakes. The dead of La Guaira and Caracas are also the victims of the historic bankruptcy of bourgeois nationalism and its Bolivarian variant. Again, don't know if I agree with this part, but the Chavista governments of Hugo Chavez, Nicolas Maduro, and now Rodriguez held power for nearly 3 decades, presiding over one of the greatest surges in oil revenue in history. They proclaimed a Bolivarian revolution and socialism of the 21st century, yet the concrete and adobe apartment blocks that pancaked on Wednesday night, many of them rebuilt after the 1999 Vargas catastrophe without seismic engineering, stand as the monument to what that version of quote-unquote socialism, that reminds me of almost democratic socialism. It's socialism with capitalism involved. It's socialism, capitalism with extra steps. What they actually delivered. A government genuinely placing human life first would have used those years of petroleum wealth to systematically retrofit and rebuild the country's housing stock to modern seismic codes, fortify its hospital system, and develop emergency preparedness systems capable of responding to a catastrophe that scientists had explicitly predicted. Except for sanctions. The social conditions that turned a seismic event into a mass grave were prepared by a century of imperialist plunder, decades of sanctions, and a corrupt bourgeois nationalism that subordinated the working class to the needs of Wall Street. The dead of Venezuela are the victims of class crime. Ain't no war but class war. The government's now dispatching rescue teams to Venezuela stood idly by or became directly complicit in the U.S. efforts to subdue the country through mass hunger, disease, and suffering. For years prior to this, Rosa Luxemburg, we know she's pretty famous, writing in 1902 about the eruption of Mount Pelée, which killed 40,000 in Martinique, gave eloquent expression to the character of such moments. She described the imperial powers that rushed to offer aid to the survivors after inflicting far more death over decades of oppression as weeping carnivores and beasts in Samaritan's clothing. If you've been imposing sanctions on this country for decades, and now all of a sudden you're coming in and acting as if you're a hero because you're leading relief efforts in a country that you've been actively starving for decades, you're not exactly the hero. You're a beast in Samaritan's clothing. Luxembourg concluded her essay with a vision of the upcoming reckoning, a volcano of social revolution that would sweep away the oppressive social order, after which humanity would at least confront its only true and final enemy, blind, dead nature. Earthquakes and other natural phenomena do not choose their victims. It's the social order based on capitalist profit and imperialist domination that determines who dies. The working class in Venezuela and internationally must take matters into its own hands, organizing independent rank-and-file relief committees to mobilize the resources necessary for effective rescue and humanitarian aid efforts, while demanding the expropriation of all the ill-gotten gains of U.S. corporations from the historic plundering of Venezuela and Latin America to rebuild on the basis of social equality. Yeah, I'm guessing Chevron is not going to contribute to the rebuilding of Venezuela, even though they've been looting the country for years. But that's who really should be paying. But remember, Chevron is the same company that had Steve Donziger put into house arrest for years because he challenged their poisoning people down in that region for years. And Chevron, if you watched our coverage of the Richard Medhurst analysis of the global war, is the single biggest beneficiary to all of this global energy. They've signed contracts in Venezuela. I believe they're the only American company right now that's allowed to take oil out of Venezuela is Chevron. They signed deals in the Levant, okay, to make new pipelines with Lebanon and Syria and Israel, and to replace Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2. Again, follow the Richard Medhurst analysis on all of that. And again, I want to, go back to Camilla's point early, is that members of the Venezuelan military and their families also find themselves among victims of the earthquake and among the dead. State and government employees and their families too. This is not about, they're not evil people, whatever. These are victims. They're all victims of imperialism because they were living there for decades, before all of this happened, and we're living under U.S. sanctions. So we can't denigrate or speak down upon that. We have no idea what it was like to live under those kind of sanctions. So thank you to Left Voice and World Socialist website for the real lefty perspective there about the anti-imperialist side, how imperialism and sanctions are actually responsible for a lot of making this worse, exacerbating the crisis, which is what I said in the title, which is that this is all being exacerbated due to decades of sanctions. Okay. Yep, saw it on Sabby Demonic. What did we see on Sabby? I think that was the thing about Jennifer Koonings. Okay, I think I have relatives there. I hope not, but I hope they're safe if so. All right, take care, Lady Alex M. I heard state troopers were setting up checkpoints, so I got car insurance for the first time. I felt invincible, drove with a feeling of impunity. I guess, but it just means you have to pay for somebody else's shit. It's not insurance, it's in case shit. I have to buy in case shit happens. Then I'm covered. Sort of. But you got to pay for that every month. You either pay now or pay later. You're paying either way. All right. Support independent media because we need it more than ever. Ways to do that are up there. People who've already done so are up there also. Cash App, $, Indie News Network. Codashfee.com/Indie News Network. paypal.me/IndieNewsNetwork. Over at patreon.com/IndieNewsNetwork. You can do that monthly. Or at Substack. We're live there now. Hello to Laura and everybody else over on Substack. We give you some hearts over there. That's at IndieMediaToday.com. Or we have another Substack for the network, INN, at INNNewsletter.com. Makes sense? And then IndieNewsNow.com. Left Voice, Asal Rod, I believe Kostashoon News, and others. I have the RSS feed for all of those going to IndieNewsNow.com. You can get 24/7 unfiltered, ad-free news from independents who I've vetted and trust without any spin, filter, or corporate media Zionism in your way. All right, let's go back to this. Hi, everybody. It is almost time for Fuck Israel, because we do that every week. Now it's time. So really the Jennifer Koonings segment and how their Stop Anti-Semitism has been targeting her, doxing her, and also trying to get her license pulled from being a registered nurse, messed up. Now we're going to get into what they're doing in Gaza, and then we're going to get into what they're doing in Lebanon and what's happening in Lebanon, and try to do some kind of an analysis, because something was recently signed with Lebanon, and I want to take a look at that with Rania Khalek, who I trust her analysis as a Lebanese person with family in the region. But before that, I would like to start the Fuck Israel segment for Gaza with this gentleman, Omar Hamad. This is my town, and among all these piles of rubble, my home once stood. Israel wiped out my entire town.
ככה שכונה נראית. 7 קילומטרים מהעיר שדרות.
There's nothing left.
זה הבית חולים, המבנה היחיד.
That's what used to be a hospital, apparently. Just to show you, so while we show the earthquake, it doesn't look like that. You can actually see the buildings, and you can see people, and you can see roads, and here it's literally just rubble and dirt. Asal Rod, this one broke me. I just saw a little girl in Gaza, barely more than a baby, in a blood-soaked shirt, and the back of her head split open. She was killed, along with her mother, because Israel is killing Palestinians every day. Now, she didn't say that she just was in Gaza. She saw a video or a picture of a little girl in Gaza. But of course, everyone's like, you're not in Gaza. You're in California. You're a liar. No, she did not say that she was in Gaza right now. What she said was she saw a picture of a girl in Gaza. The decline in reporting isn't just because the genocide ever stopped. It's because Israel killed the journalists, and their Western colleagues want you to believe there's a quote-unquote ceasefire. Only Israel never stopped ceasing fire. Because fuck Israel. Now, on top of that, I brought our friend, the dissident, one of the INN co-founding members, and I include all of his articles every Friday in the INN newsletter. Israel continues to smear and slaughter journalists in Gaza. And this was Friday, the 25th. Okay, Israel has targeted and killed yet another Palestinian journalist in Gaza, this time Ahmed Wisha, a photojournalist for Al Jazeera, who was killed in, quote, an Israeli air attack on central Gaza's Bureij refugee camp, making him the 12th Al Jazeera journalist killed by Israel in Gaza. Fuck Israel. His murder came weeks after his brother Mohammed, who also worked for the Doha-based network, was killed in deliberate Israeli shelling of his car. Israel took credit for his murder, claiming without evidence, trust me, bro, that he was a resistance fighter. Anyone over the age of 18 to them is a resistance fighter. Anyone that's managed to survive for the last 3 years. Journalist Sharif Abdel Kudus reported, quote, Ahmed was killed Saturday as he was still mourning the death of his brother, Mohammed, who was assassinated by Israel in an airstrike of his car west of Gaza City in April. The Israeli military openly bragged about killing Mohammed at the time, claiming, as they always do without evidence, that he was Hamas. They did the same, actually, with Ahmed. The Israeli military confirmed to AFP that they had killed him, and they said he was, quote, a Hamas terrorist. After Mohammed's death, it was Ahmed who was taking care of his late brother's children. He was taking on additional responsibilities in their family, and now he's been killed as well. In response, Al Jazeera said, quote, Al Jazeera Media Network condemns the Israeli occupation army's baseless accusations, which seek to justify its crimes against Al Jazeera journalists and cameramen in Gaza, most recently the killing of cameraman Ahmed Wishah, adding that since October of 2023, the Israeli campaign of incitement has relentlessly spread false allegations and baseless accusations against Al Jazeera staff. The network considers this smear campaign a transparent and futile effort to justify the deliberate targeting of journalists and cameramen whose only quote-unquote crime has been their courageous determination to document and expose the genocide being perpetrated by Israeli occupation forces in the Gaza Strip, and not allowing Israel to frame that narrative themselves. A repeated playbook. Indeed, Israel has a long history of falsely claiming that Palestinian journalists working for Al Jazeera were resistance fighters to justify murdering them. Israel falsely claimed that freelance journalist Hossam Shabbat was a member of Hamas after murdering him, but propagandist Jeremy Scahill confirmed that Hamas has conducted an internal audit reviewing brigade records and interviewing members, which found Hossam Shabbat was not a sniper, not in Qasem, and not affiliated with Hamas at all. He added that, quote, Hamas typically claims its fighters publicly when they're killed, but in this case they made clear Shabbat was not one of them. They're perfectly fine claiming it if Israel killed one of their fighters. The CPJ, and Reef and Colin are going to talk about just how bad the CPJ have been and how badly they're whitewashing Israel's war crimes now. The CPJ even documented that Israel repeatedly created fake documents that falsely claimed Palestinian journalists were combatants to justify their murder. They literally would put them in fake Hamas militant garb. The organization noted that Al Jazeera correspondent Ismail Al-Ghul killed along with freelance reporter Rami Al-Rifi near Gaza City by an Israeli drone strike on July 31st, 2024, was accused by the Israeli occupation of being an engineer in the Hamas Gaza Brigade, but the fake documents put out by Israel contained contradictory information showing that Al-Ghul, born in 1997, received a Hamas military ranking in 2007 when he would have been 10 years old. The document also indicated that Al-Ghul joined Hamas's military wing in 2014 at the age of 17, and that the IDF released Al-Ghul after detaining him during the Army's March 18, 2024 raid on Al-Shifa Hospital, which Al Jazeera disproved the IDF's false claim of his affiliation with any organization. Again, even CPJ admits this. They also, again, documented YL al-Dadu's son Hamza and freelancer Mustafa Thuraya killed in an Israeli airstrike on January 7th, 2024. That was only 90 days or so after October 7th. Israel alleged that they were terrorists, quote unquote, operating a drone posing a threat to IDF soldiers. Not true. A WAPO analysis of their drone footage from that day found no indications that either man was operating anything other than a journalist that day. The available footage shows that the journalists did not film any IDF troops, aircraft, or military equipment, nor were there any indications of IDF troops in the vicinity of the area where they filmed. None of that matters. Not anymore. Not to these people. WAPO investigation also noted that both journalists, not Hamas fighters, journalists, passed through Israeli checkpoints on their way to the south early in the war, and that Dadu had been approved to leave Gaza, a rare privilege unlikely to have been granted to a known militant. Israel ran a similar smear campaign before murdering one of Al Jazeera's most well-known reporters, Anas al-Sharif, last August, releasing fake documents that all contradicted each other. Here's another receipt. Furthermore, even the Likud-connected journalist Amit Segal admitted that Anas al-Sharif was also detained by the IDF during the takeover of Shifa Hospital, but was later released, debunking claims that he was a combatant or associated with Hamas. They certainly would not have released him. Then we've got the legitimization cell. All of these smears are used by Israel to murder Palestinian journalists. Every one of them comes from an Israeli intelligence cutout called the legitimization cell, which the Israeli magazine 972 reported was tasked to identify Gaza-based journalists it could portray as undercover Hamas operatives in an effort to blunt growing global outrage over Israel's killing of reporters. Now, remember that Israel has murdered more reporters since October 7th, 2023, than all of the world wars combined prior to that, than in the prior 100 years. Israeli intelligence sources admitted that the legitimization cell's motivation wasn't security, but PR. Driven by anger that Gaza-based reporters were smearing Israel's name in front of the world by holding a camera up and showing what they're doing, its members were eager to find a journalist they could link to Hamas and mark as a target, because they're bloodthirsty, murderous land thieves who can't have anybody tell the truth about what they're doing, but rather only spread the narrative that they want spread. One member of the legitimization cell admitted, quote, the team regularly collected intelligence that could be used for Hasbara. I thought Hasbara was a fake term. The idea was to allow the military to operate without pressure so countries like America wouldn't stop supplying weapons. And we haven't. One source even admitted that the legitimization cell misrepresented intelligence in a way that allowed for the false portrayal of a journalist as a member of Hamas's military wing. This reminds me a lot of like Zaka, the Zaka organization that openly admits to making stuff up for shock value in order to gain sympathy, even though they're lies. Yet again, Israel runs the same lies and smear campaign from the legitimization cell against two more Al Jazeera reporters to justify slaughtering them for exposing Israel's crimes. Fuck Israel. So, what we're seeing now is a major escalation in Gaza, even in the past week. Now you have Israel's security chiefs are revisiting the Gaza expulsion plan despite global rejection. What does this mean? See, now again, look at the difference with the tents, and these are all just shells of a building, versus this, the Alan McLeod pictures. That I wouldn't equate the two of them to be quite the same. Maybe in 6 months, that's what this will look like, but that's not what this looks like right now. Okay. Israel's National Security Council has convened an urgent meeting to revive plans for so-called voluntary migration of Palestinians from Gaza, despite senior officials warning that no country has agreed to take in Palestinians from the besieged enclave. Except Somaliland, technically, but they're not really a country, though Israel is trying to recognize them. And they're in the midst of a civil war with the government of Somalia that doesn't want to recognize that as a separate country. All right. Shmuel Ben Ezra, new head of Israel's National Security Council, okay, encouraging voluntary emigration from the Gaza Strip. Again, doesn't say where. Meeting is said to have been attended by officials from the Israeli army, Shin Bet, Mossad, who reportedly said there had been no practical progress on the plan. So, okay, now they're meeting about forced expulsion, right? Nah, not exactly, because let's now talk about ethnic cleansing. All right, so Dave DeCamp, Indie Media Award honoree, antiwar.com, also Indie Media Award honorees. Oh, there we go. A source speaking to Haaretz wouldn't rule out that the revival of the plan could be compensation from the U.S. for asking Israel to make painful concessions as part of the Iran deal. What? So again, this is very similar to the article I just read there from Middle East Monitor. While Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz recently declared that the ethnic cleansing plan would be implemented at the right time, there have been no countries willing to cooperate. The report said during the meeting, which was attended by them, that there was no progress. The report suggested that the meeting and revival, could be related to the U.S.-Iran Memorandum of Understanding and the U.S. request for Israel to de-escalate in Lebanon. All right, so all of this stuff is linked together. Of course, they have to stop, but they also need to let the Palestinians rebuild Gaza. While Israel still hasn't made progress on removing Palestinians from Gaza, the IDF does occupy now more than 60% of Gaza and continues to take more territory in violation of that ceasefire deal, quote unquote, U.S. backed. Israel hasn't faced any consequences from the U.S. for taking the territory or for continuing daily attacks in Gaza, which have killed more than 1,000 Palestinians since the truce agreement, quote unquote, was signed in October. How many Israelis have been killed by Palestinians since then? I believe the answer is 0, because they've actually held to the ceasefire. But there was yet another Dave DeCamp article. I believe it was Dave DeCamp. Yep. Bezalel Smotrich, who's another one of their finance minister, another one of these demonic lunatics, genocidal maniacs, war criminal, says Israel has plans drawn up already to establish 3 Jewish settlements in Gaza, just waiting for Netanyahu's okay. Now that the IDF occupies 70% of Gaza as of yesterday, June 29th. So now we've already gone from we're going to expel them, but there's nobody to take them and ethnically cleanse them. What's going to happen if they ethnically cleanse and there's nobody to take them? They're going to bomb them to death. And now they're going to set up settlements on top of the bones. So Smotrich said on Monday that the Israeli government has plans drawn up already to establish 3 Jewish settlements in the Gaza Strip and is just waiting for approval from the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin war criminal Netanyahu. The settlements, which would clearly be illegal under international law, are being planned by the Israeli Defense Ministry's Settlement Administration, a body created under Smotrich, who also holds the position in the Defense Ministry. Right? He created this back in 2023. Smotrich said the administration has completed the groundwork to establish 3 settlements in the North Gaza area, which has been completely cleared now for like over a year. They blew up everything. They've leveled it to the ground. So now they're like running pipeline, they're running water, and they're going to establish their own settlement communities on top of, wow, it's just the most horrific shit you can imagine, I swear. So complete the mission and restore true security for the residents of the South. The South of what? How is that restoring true security for the residents of the South? Israeli military officials said last week that the IDF now controls 70% of Gaza. Right? We established that. A violation of the U.S.-backed ceasefire deal. Okay. Which left Israeli troops occupying about 53% of the Palestinian territory. The deal explicitly stated that Israel couldn't take any more territory if Hamas fulfilled its obligations under the agreement, which the group did by releasing all remaining Israeli hostages and retrieving the bodies of the deceased Israelis. Well, so again, who's not living up to their end of the bargain? Oh, right.
It's exactly.
Hold on. So Israeli officials claim Hamas has violated the deal by not disarming, but Hamas didn't commit to laying it down its weapons under the ceasefire deal. The issues of the group's disarmament and Israel's withdrawal from Gaza were meant to be worked out in follow-up negotiations, which have been impeded by Israel's constant violations of the agreement, which have killed more than 1,000 Palestinians. They also have killed multiple negotiators and blown up any potential peace talks every time they're scheduled to happen. They don't want peace. They want all of it, and they want to kill everybody there. Smotrich said in his remarks that Israel should take more than 70% of Gaza. He wants 100% right here, right there. Netanyahu even said it last month when someone shouted that. We'll start at 70%. Smotrich's comments about settlements come as Israeli media is reporting that Israeli government officials are reviving their push for an ethnic cleansing plan to forcibly remove the Palestinian population of Gaza, which they are rebranding as a free movement plan. Yeah, but they're not getting right of free return. They can't come home to their homes. So far, Israel has failed to find any countries willing to be complicit in the effort and take in Palestinians from Gaza. But even if they did, they're not allowing them right of return. They're allowing them to become refugees, and they're not giving them a passport. They're not giving them status and the ability to travel around the world freely without any consequences or, heavily restricted. And like that's just occupation extended. Fuck these people. Fuck Israel. All right. For doing all this. Now, Jesse Jett, you all know Jesse Jett. I host a show called American Tradition with him. Back last September, I think it was last September. No, it was September of 2024. Almost 2 years ago now, he wrote a poem called A Prayer for the Promised Land. And now that the reality of that is coming to be, I want to play this piece on the show now because I feel like it's appropriate. So I'm going to give Jesse the next 5 minutes and 47 seconds, and I'm going to share that.
Who are these people?
Well, you guys are all in for a little treat. Jesse decided that he had something he needed to record now, and we're going to do that, and I'm going to turn it all over to Jesse. So here you go, man.
All right. Yeah, I thought I'd have everything written for this next album, but then this piece just kind of happened. I was thinking about the end result of the Gaza genocide, their big plans, after the ethnic cleansing is all done, which is construction. It's big real estate beachfront property plans that they've already brought and showed to everybody. And it struck me all of a sudden that, like, apparently nobody who was tasked with making up those plans ever saw, like, Poltergeist. Because it's my understanding that it's bad luck to put a house anywhere there's been a, like, small-scale tragedy. A murder-suicide is enough to haunt a property. The idea of a city built on such a relatively small space where so much suffering has happened is apparently not horrifying to the people that are doing it, that are colonizing it. But it struck me what that could look like, and this piece kind of took form that I wanted to be careful to title a prayer, because more than anything, I hope that if it's gonna turn out like it looks like Norman Finkelstein said, that the majority of damage is already done. Like, Gaza is destroyed. Could they potentially rebuild? Yes, theoretically. Are there still Palestinians? Sure, but they've put such a massive gash in the land and the people that that's not something you come back from. So this piece is a prayer that it's exactly the worst that it could be. This is called A Prayer for the Promised Land. Well, it looks like you'll get what you wanted, as criminals so often do. In the same way a rapist might fix on a goal and by any means see that goal through. Like you'll only be happy to settle once you've bled every creature that breathes, for a promised land caked in the life that was Gaza, craters and uprooted trees. Where even as I sit and type this, they are bulldozing all of the streets, and they'll pave over every war crime committed and mass grave forgotten beneath. And they'll leech even more of our taxes for the BlackRock-approved Middle East, for new luxury 3-bedroom condos next to torn, bloody tents on the beach. So I pray, the first day of the project, once construction can finally begin, the officials break ground, the shovel digs down, and up comes what used to be skin. And as workers look over their blueprints, the foreman rechecking the plans, the ghosts of the fathers of Gaza surround them with children who hang from their hands. I pray when you walk in those newly built homes, as you smile and take a deep breath, that the rot in the air chokes you down to your knees, overwhelmed by the odor of death. Then the first time you step in the shower, to wash off the filth of that day, I pray that the shower head soaks you in blood and nothing can wash it away. And you stumble away from the shower as the blood starts to seep through the walls, and you hear it cascade from the ceiling as in terror you tear through the hall. And above all your shrieks and your screaming, all of Palestine's children will call. Those who begged in the dark for the touch of their mother, a touch some had not known at all. Now, could this be your holy land, soldier? Is this where you plan to call home? You really expect to come live out your life that you ever could truly atone? There are none of you worthy of mercy who have scattered these souls to the sands. And if an IDF soldier would like my respect, he can air out his skull like a man. Or better yet, take up his arms against those who would have him bring death to these lands. And yet among you are so few objectors. Just how long till the conscience is banned? So no, I do not speak for Gaza, but I pray Gaza speaks by your bed. I don't know what went through the minds of its martyrs, but I still see inside of their heads. So I pray that they join in a choir. Pray they wail in your walls while you sleep. Pray the mothers in mourning pierce right through your core. I pray you may never know peace. You can cleanse and cleanse to your morbid content, but it will not leave things pure. So I pray, if you get what you wanted, it is all that you truly deserve. That's a prayer for the promised land.
That's a prayer for the promised land. I love that, man. Jesse Jett, everybody. That prayer, that poem has been in my head for 2 years. I regularly hear it and replay it for myself as a reminder and to continue to maintain the level of rage. Not that it requires any of that, but the focus for here's where we saw this going 2 years ago. And now it's really going there. So fuck Israel for all that, because they're not even stopping there, as we knew they wouldn't. Support independent media because we need it more than ever. I don't know anybody else is showing you a poem on a Tuesday night live stream, but I did. Antiwar.com, Middle East Monitor, we're all user-funded, World Socialist website, a Left Voice, all of us user-funded. It's really important to not have that corporate bias, that advertiser influence. That's why we do what we do, and we rely on you with Cash App, $, Indie News Network, or giving us over at co-fee.com, $5 here, $10 there, /Indie News Network. I appreciate everybody on that list. I look at that list every day. PayPal.me/Indie News Network. Okay. You do that as friends and family because you're all friends and family. Patreon.com/Indie News Network. You can do that for monthly. And then over at Substack, IndieMediaToday.com, INNNewsletter.com. Those are two different Substacks you can support monthly or annually. And then IndieNewsNow.com is the website where a lot of the articles you've been seeing tonight have come from, or at least are linked to. It's an RSS feed website that updates 24/7, completely ad-free. I built it for myself to be able to track all this stuff, but also for everybody else to use and bookmark as your homepage. Open it because it'll change with new stories every time you open a new browser.
I enjoy it.
See, even Nancy Pelosi enjoys it. Seriously, like everybody is down with IndieNewsNow.com. Actually, fuck Nancy Pelosi. I hope she's not really reading it, but maybe she learned something if she did, but we know she doesn't. Okay. We just talked about the ethnic cleansing plan for Gaza, the settlement plan for Gaza, and a prayer for the promised land for Gaza. Next, I want to get to Lebanon. And then we're going to get to a lightning round. We'll do some GoFundMe stuff, and then we will get out of here. So, next, Lebanon. Lebanon's fucky, man. So it started out last Friday. Washington talks stall as Israel refuses to leave. So we know, and this is again footage of a destroyed building bombed by Israel with U.S. weapons. This was in Tyre, okay, and this was on May 29th. This is a 3,500-year-old city that we have brought to rubble, or that Israel has brought to rubble. Why? Negotiations between Israel and Lebanon and Washington had reportedly hit a deadlock. Okay, that changed over the withdrawal of Israeli forces from southern Lebanon amid Israeli demands for guarantees preventing the return of Hezbollah and preserving the operational freedom of its military. According to diplomatic sources cited by the Israeli newspaper Ma'ariv, the fifth round of U.S.-mediated talks so far has failed to produce an agreement that would allow Israeli troops to withdraw. Israel is insisting on remaining in southern Lebanon until it is assured that Hezbollah has been pushed away from the area and prevented from rebuilding its military infrastructure. The dispute emerged during the fifth round of meetings between the Israeli and Lebanese delegations in Washington, according to the London-based newspaper Asharq al-Awsat. I've never heard of that organization. All right. Again, this is mostly taking what Iran says. Sources added that the U.S. side argued that involving Iran in some arrangements linked to Lebanon could serve as a means of pressuring Hezbollah and ensuring the implementation of understandings aimed at preserving Lebanon's sovereignty. So now they're pitting basically Lebanon against Iran, saying that Hezbollah effectively is an Iranian infiltration of Lebanon against the Lebanese government. It seems like that's how they're trying to position this. I disagree with that assessment entirely. Hezbollah is, first of all, a political party. They have their own military wing. That I'm going to get into that in a minute. So, on top of that, Jason Ditz over at antiwar.com, Indie Media Award honoree, over 11,000 buildings have been destroyed during the Israeli invasion of southern Lebanon. Again, that's since March 2nd. Okay, it's June 30th, about to be July 1st. You're talking about 120 days, and they leveled 11,000 buildings? Thousands more damaged as Israeli forces systematically destroy the far southern villages. They're turning them into Gaza so that they can then rebuild settlements on top of them. More promised land. That's why they dropped all the bridges over the Litani River, because now that would be a natural border. They're going to end up rebuilding them themselves because now they're starting to move north of the Litani, according to Vanessa Beeley, who's living in the country. I watched her live stream with Fiorello last night. Go watch that. Critical Perspectives, if you haven't, over at Vanessa's Substack, vanessabeeley.substack.com. I'm a paid subscriber to Vanessa. She's also an Indie Media Award honoree. But Jason says, since early in the Israeli invasion of Lebanon, there have been persistent reports of the Israeli military engaging in deliberate destruction operations aiming to entirely destroy the Lebanese Shiite villages near the Blue Line in the far south. New reports reveal the extent of the destruction. A joint statement from Lebanon's National Council and the UN Development Program said that through April, over 11,000 buildings were completely destroyed south of the Litani River. Okay? Since some of those were multi-residential dwellings, mainly apartment buildings, 17,891 residential units were lost. And of course, all those people have now lost their homes and everything that was inside of it that they couldn't carry with them as they ran for their lives while they were getting bombed. Iran doesn't seem capable for bombing Zionazi Israel into carrying it all. I don't know what they're doing. They don't want to be bombed themselves. They want to stop the bombing on them because, remember, they're being bombed. So they want to stop the bombing, and they did condition one of the points on stopping bombing of Lebanon. So they are conditioning it on that. It doesn't seem that they are being aggressors enforcing that the United States hold to this memorandum of understanding that they had signed a week prior. All right, but now we've got a memorandum of understanding between Israel and Lebanon that would maybe satisfy point one of the Iran-U.S. memorandum of understanding. All right. Tell me we're not in World War III because we're requiring all these different things to hinge upon each other. All right. But on top of all these buildings destroyed, more than 2,200 were partially damaged and 9,300 more damaged in a minor way. All right. Between the two of them, that's another 23,500 residential units that have been damaged to varying degrees. And I will bet that Israel will go ahead and finish the job of destroying them all and never allowing anybody to come back. Look at these. That's got to be it's a Reuters photo. Only like Reuters journalists and people with this level of equipment get this quality of photo. All right, I don't pay for a Reuters license. I don't pay for an AP or a Getty Images license. The research report was conducted based on satellite images from April 29th, which, when compared to images from the previous October, showed which buildings were leveled or otherwise damaged. Obviously, since the war has raged for another 2 months since, a lot more destruction can be expected. And remember, they've also stopped all the real-time satellite imagery over the area because Israel and the U.S. didn't want its war crimes being documented and people knowing just to the extent of the destruction. They'll show you down the road after it's all said and done and there's nothing anybody can do about it, and people will shake their head and go, man, that's terrible. But when you see it happening in real time and you can actually speak up and try to get it stopped, it has an impact on the public. And this is all about managing the public's perception of what this is, which is awful because people's lives are hanging in the balance. The BBC had a more recent report regarding the destruction of Christian villages in the area, though they didn't attempt to quantify it. Though a ceasefire was announced in mid-April and several more since then, the Lebanese death toll has continued to rise at an alarming rate, so the destruction is unlikely to have slowed all that meaningfully. Just through April 29th, the damage was already estimated to be at $1.38 billion, and that only includes the buildings, and specifically doesn't include bridges or other infrastructure that was destroyed during the war. That would include every single bridge on the Litani River, like I mentioned earlier, and a substantial number of solar panels in Debal. So all told, the cost of the attacks is probably much higher than the estimate. Probably closer to $2 billion, on top of all the stuff that was lost and destroyed and will never be replaced. The intention is that the civilian population won't be allowed back at all, according to Israel Katz, who declared today that 200,000 residents will not return, justifying it on the grounds that when there were civilians in the area, there was also resistance to the occupation, so they're not going to allow that. Who said they're allowed to occupy southern Lebanon again? This is a sovereign fucking country. The fact that the international community isn't up in arms over this is a scandal. And nobody seems to be paying it. Nobody seems to notice. Nobody seems to care. The world just keeps moving on, as our friend George Carlin used to say. Now again, Indie Media Award honoree Rania Khalek from Breakthrough News. Breakthrough News recently announced that they merged with People's Dispatch to try to create more of a public publishing and video arm, similar to the way that INN was initially ideated to begin with, where we have journalists that write stories and then live streamers that actually cover it on our live video shows. We kind of have that, and I'm hoping to grow more into that as time goes by, but it's got to be the right fit. But meanwhile, Rania, Lebanon's own government, declares war on its own people. What the hell's going on here? So now, again, a memorandum of understanding was signed, and she's going to break that down here. I'm going to go through it. This agreement cements the Israeli occupation, which can now only be undone through civil war in coordination with the U.S. and Israel. Sick. It also threatens to torpedo the U.S.-Iran deal, which was the entire intent in the first place. Nobody ever wanted to make a deal with Iran. Okay. We had just lost the stream. Now we're back. Hi, everybody. We're back. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened. Immediately, I'm talking about Lebanon. I'm talking about D.C. I'm talking about Trump corruption. And look what happens. We glitched out. Hi, everybody. We're back. Sorry about that. Okay. Let's continue with Rania Khalek's article here. RaniaKhalek.substack.com. Lebanon's government declares war on its own people. Lebanese government has joined Israel and the U.S. in declaring a war on a massive segment of its own population. My biggest question is why? What did the Lebanese government get out of this? But I guess what they get is they get rid of Hezbollah in the long term, which is what some of these people wanted. Yesterday, Lebanon's ambassador to the U.S. signed a framework agreement with Israel during a fifth round of negotiations hosted by Washington. The agreement is treacherous, shocking, and shameful. It cements Israel's occupation of the Lebanese territory in the south, which can only now be undone through a Lebanese army-led civil war coordinated with the U.S. and Israel. That does not seem like a good idea. The Lebanese elites who promote this submission to empire love to invoke sovereignty. They talk about Hezbollah as if it's an alien force implanted by Iran rather than an organic, indigenous, and popular military formation born out of resistance to Israeli occupation in the 1980s. Remember, if Israel didn't occupy Lebanon, there never would be a Hezbollah. For these elites, any resistance to Israel is a violation of Lebanon's sovereignty, while taking orders from Washington and Tel Aviv against Lebanon's own interests is considered normal, independent, and even virtuous. Up is down, right is left. That is, wow. The Lebanese government refused to use the leverage Iran's insistence on a ceasefire and Israeli withdrawal had given them. Instead, they collaborated with Americans and Israelis on Israel's terms, handing Marco Rubio a tool to undermine the U.S.-Iran agreement in the process. Why? Netanyahu's bragging that this is a major achievement because it allows Israel's occupation to continue indefinitely. The Lebanese presidency is celebrating it as a sovereignty win somehow that will liberate Lebanese land, but has offered no details as to how, and the agreement itself shows no such thing. Hezbollah rejected it, obviously, because it's total capitulation to Israeli land theft. So here's the surrender agreement. The full text of the framework is available here, and she links to it. Nicholas Sawaya has a great breakdown of all 14 points. I'll highlight the most damning. First, this agreement is mediated and overseen by the U.S., which is not a neutral party. I don't know who would be a neutral party in this case. The U.S. underwrites Israel's entire military, funding, weapons, Iron Dome, intelligence, diplomatic cover. It's an active participant in the crimes being committed against the Lebanese. The past has demonstrated it cannot be trusted to fairly mediate anything involving Israel. Also, a fair assessment. Let's remember those 15,000 Israeli ceasefire violations between November 2024 and March 2026 that went totally unchecked by the U.S.-run mechanism. So, yes, to all of these things. Maybe the Chinese might be better mediators, but they then have the capitalistic advantage and you know, they have to look at it as their economic partner in the United States would wield much more power. So I don't know who that honest broker would be, to be honest. Point 2 stipulates that Israeli withdrawal is contingent on the Lebanese army first disarming Hezbollah, meaning civil war. This flips international law on its head. Again, insane. Israel's occupation is illegal whether Hezbollah exists or not. The agreement states that the Lebanese Army Front will restore effective sovereign authority over all Lebanese territory pending the verified disarmament of non-state armed groups and the dismantlement of associated infrastructure, very vague, enabling the IDF to progressively redeploy out of Lebanese territory. Why do they need Hezbollah out of the area to redeploy? By agreeing to disarm Hezbollah first, with the markers for verified disarmament yet to be determined by the U.S., the Lebanese government has cemented the occupation of the South, because now they will never be verified disarmed. Just like Hamas has never, they keep moving that goalpost. They've never agreed to full disarmament. They were never supposed to agree to full disarmament. But that's now the talking point. Same thing here. Point 3 conditions international reconstruction aid and the return of hundreds of thousands of displaced Lebanese civilians on the Lebanese army disarming Hezbollah in phased pilot zones. Sounds like concentration camps. Also to be determined by the U.S., a non-honest broker here. The framework states that reconstruction will begin, I'm sure funded by the, with Kushner getting the contracts, and civilians will be allowed to return only upon the confirmation of successful disarmament. The civilians were in no danger from Hezbollah, dummies. They were in danger from the IDF. This sells out the people of the South entirely and hands Washington a blackmail lever over the entire process. Why? Again, why? This is insane. It's so frustrating. I think it's because they want the bombs to stop, and they think that it's going to make the bombs stop and that they're going to stop here. They're not. If anything, you're giving yourself a temporary reprieve, guys. Come on. Who are we talking about here? Point 4 states that the government will, quote, rebuild the state's monopoly on the use of force, achieve the complete and verified disarmament of all non-state armed groups, and ensure that such groups will have no military or security role and no armed capabilities anywhere in Lebanon. This means disarming Hezbollah north of the Litani as well. Complete disarmament of Hezbollah now entirely. It also calls on, quote, international and particularly Arab partners under the leadership of the United States, unquote, to support this outcome. A U.S.-led, Arab-supported civil war, in other words. And they agreed to this, which to me says they didn't think they had any other choice. Point 5 states that, quote, the government of Israel declares that it has no territorial ambitions in Lebanon. Israel ministers say the opposite on a regular basis. And here's receipts that show that. They want to set up Jewish settlements, exclusively Israeli-led Jewish settlements in Lebanon. Point 9 establishes U.S.-run performance reviews of how effectively the Lebanese state is prosecuting a civil war against Hezbollah. Wait, now we're the judges of how well they're doing with an internal thing? What? Yeah. International support for Lebanon will be conditioned on American satisfaction with the results. Fuck you. Who are we? Who is America to decide whether, wow, the humiliation is structural and Rania is actually embarrassed for these sellouts? I wouldn't be. I'm embarrassed for the Lebanese public that put these sellouts in charge somehow. Point 11 commits the Lebanese government to helping suffocate Hezbollah financially through sanctions. Now they are sanctioning their own citizens, elected members of their own parliament. Because remember that Hezbollah is also a political organization, similar to the way that Hamas was. But here, Hezbollah actually has seats in parliament. We're going to get to this. Point 13 demonstrates shocking incompetence as it gives up Lebanon's right to hostile or adverse actions in international political or legal fora. Wait, what? Yeah, that means the Lebanese government agreed to forfeit using the law against Israel for the endless list of war crimes they've committed against Lebanon. They just wiped the slate clean. It's wild that this is coming from a government whose prime minister was a judge on the International Court of Justice and presided over South Africa's case on the genocide in Gaza. Wait, what? Yeah, in fucking scene. Finally, point 14 frames this entire framework as the foundation for a future normalization agreement with Israel. This almost sounds like a Jelani thing, like they had a puppet there that they told, sign this and you'll be the leader with whatever is left when we decide we're done looting, murdering, bombing, and stealing. And now we've got the anti-resistance stooges that Rania is going to talk about. This deal is reminiscent of the May 17th agreement of 1983, when the U.S. brokered a Lebanese surrender deal with Israel containing many of the same stipulations, cementing Israeli occupation and declaring war on resistance to it. That agreement was signed by Israel's allies in Lebanon and abrogated within a year because it was politically untenable. But meanwhile, it took more than 20 years, almost 20 years, to get rid of the Israelis from occupying southern Lebanon. Now they're back. I'm sure this agreement will meet the same fate, but at what cost in the meantime? Hezbollah is not some alien organization. It represents a huge portion of Lebanon's Shia population. So this is an internal war of Shias versus Sunni. That's why it's democratically elected to parliament as part of the largest parliamentary bloc, despite a system that structurally devalues the Shia vote through Lebanon's own version of gerrymandering. There are people accusing Hezbollah of threatening civil war to prevent this agreement. They have it backwards. Hezbollah is reacting to the very real threat laid out explicitly in this framework of a U.S. and Israeli-sponsored civil war against the population it represents. A population that spent the last 3 months being displaced and hunted by Israeli bombs with zero protection from the state. Not Hezbollah bombs. Hezbollah's not attacking Lebanon. Israel and the United States are. And yet now they have to sign this kind of an agreement. President Joseph Aoun and Prime Minister Nawaf Salam claim to support sovereignty. What they're actually doing is using foreign-backed violence to weaken their domestic political opponents. There is nothing more anti-democratic than that. So this is like a fascist-level takeover. Then she talks about something interesting here. I don't know if I necessarily agree with this, because all of this is like warring factions within a fascist capitalist framework where they're all reporting to the two main CIA guys, Peter Thiel and Larry Ellison. Rubio, a Larry Ellison guy, Vance, a Peter Thiel guy. And maybe that's the power struggle dynamic as they position for 2028. Who's going to end up with the nomination potentially? It could be either one of them. With Larry Ellison behind Marco Rubio, man owns a lot of media outlets that can do a lot of propagandizing on behalf of Rubio. So she talks about Rubio versus Vance, this little struggle, power play. This makes Lebanon once again the most exposed pressure point in the Iran Memorandum of Understanding. Iran has written a ceasefire into its demands for an end to the war and has called for an Israeli withdrawal from Lebanon. When Israel bombed Beirut earlier this month, another war crime, by the way, Iran responded by bombing Israel. The first point of the MOU demands an end to the war in Lebanon. Iran is watching to see whether the Americans can actually restrain the Israelis. So far, they've partially succeeded. The violence remains daily, but less intense than a month ago. I don't think that's a win. This is where the Vance-Rubio split becomes crucial to understand, she says. Reuters reported that the two men have been striking different tones. Again, I don't believe Reuters, and Reuters has their own agenda and biases. Vance blasted Israeli bombing of civilian infrastructure in Beirut as undermining U.S.-led peace efforts. He traveled to Switzerland for talks with Iranian officials, and he's repeatedly raised the possibility of a cooperative relationship between the U.S. and Iran. Rubio, on the other hand, works for Israel, toward Gulf states defending Israel's military campaign in Lebanon, while reassuring allies that the Iran deal wouldn't be too generous to the big bad Iranians. Vance wants to end this war because he's gearing up for the 2028 Republican primary and wants the mantle of the anti-war candidate who stood up to an increasingly despised Israel. That's a nice narrative, but it's completely untrue. Rubio represents the neocon wing that remains unconditionally aligned with Netanyahu. The Lebanon-Israel framework has his fingerprints all over it, engineered to separate Lebanon from Iran and preserve Israel's ability to continue the war. It reads like an attempt to torpedo the Vance track. See, but the truth is that Vance is set up much more long-term because the neocons that are aligned with Netanyahu have a shelf life, whereas Vance is more involved at the Palantir layer, which, maintains and continues and sustains past different administrations, because they're going to have the Oracle framework and the Palantir layer of surveillance data in place to support them. I don't think that Rubio's going to have that level. Just after the framework was signed, the U.S. announced it had bombed Iran again in an apparent violation of that memorandum of understanding, claiming that it was in response to Iran firing at a ship in the Strait of Hormuz. Again, no receipts. Iran did not take credit for firing at the ship, but didn't deny it either. Iran has since responded to the U.S. by striking Bahrain. The Israelis then launched a drone attack on Lebanon the same day. Again, tell me we're not in World War III? Rubio had spent his Gulf tour promising Arab allies that Iran would never control the strait or collect tolls on it. Meanwhile, the drone over Beirut is buzzing into my ear louder than ever. The return to war rhetoric is escalating, and so is the noise. Again, I don't think that she's on either the side of Rubio or Vance. She's just pointing out the difference in their different personal goals and agendas here. Can disarming Hezbollah work? Ranya's assessment is no. If the full might of the Israeli military couldn't disarm Hezbollah, the far weaker Lebanese army certainly can. And if a civil war is actually attempted, the Lebanese army will split. But what does Israel care? Israel wants endless war and instability, and it has servants in Lebanon willing to perpetuate that policy. But more than that, again, it's not just having the far weaker Lebanese army behind them, because it would now be the Lebanese army backed by the IDF in Israel going after Hezbollah. Now you've got a much larger coalition. She said she's reminded of Frantz Fanon's Wretched of the Earth, quote, "The national bourgeoisie discovers its historical mission as intermediary. Its vocation is not to transform the nation, but prosaically serve as a conveyor belt for capitalism, forced to camouflage itself behind the mask of neocolonialism. The national bourgeoisie, with no misgivings and with great pride, revels in the role of agent in its dealings with the Western bourgeoisie." Interesting. So that's the motivation. The comprador class of Lebanon is the Fanon quote in real time. As I explained earlier this week, they still don't seem to understand that their American masters lost the war with Iran. Because I don't know if they necessarily did. I mean, there are parts that they've lost, but they also now have much more of a control over global shipping and over oil and gas trade and all the natural gas ports and other things that were destroyed that have allowed the U.S. now, according to Richard Medhurst, to be the petro gas dollar, in control of, again, global energy supply. She says this framework agreement is a mandate for civil war dressed up in the language of sovereignty. It will fail, but perhaps the damage it does along the journey to failure is the point. So again, I really wanted to bring Ranya's perspective as someone who is Lebanese, who has family in the area, who has personal stake in this. I've got more. So this is The Dissident. I brought one of his articles earlier, the 307.substack.com, how the Israel-Lebanon deal destroys the Lebanese sovereignty and the MOU with Iran single-handedly both. Okay? On Friday, it was signed and brokered by Marco Rubio that essentially gives Lebanese sovereignty away to Israel and destroys the memorandum of understanding with Iran. Now, I don't know, again, if I agree with complete end to sovereignty, but interesting because, again, it's a security zone in Lebanon for as long as is needed for Israeli security. The Lebanese government requested from Washington not to publish the secret security annex within the framework agreement with Israel, which stipulates a clear commitment from both parties that any step will not be implemented according to timelines, but according to conditions, and that the framework agreement stipulates freedom of operation inside the blue line against immediate and emerging threats. They can make up whatever they want now. They control the territory, they control the narrative, they control everything inside of it. Furthermore, Israeli media reports that within the security annex to the Israel-Lebanon Framework Agreement, Israel does not only have to confirm the pilot locations, the IDF will also enter the areas it withdrew from to verify that the Lebanese army has indeed dismantled Hezbollah's infrastructure on the ground. Now you have, like I said, the IDF alongside the Lebanese army hunting out and smoking out Hezbollah. In other words, according to the deal, Israel is allowed to occupy with no timetable to withdraw and is able to enter areas of Lebanon to verify that they've dismantled Hezbollah's infrastructure on the ground. Didn't they do that with the pager attack? Oh, right. That was also a terrorist attack. Right. Unreal. In the analysis, Elia Magner noted that under the agreement, Israel keeps the power to decide when it feels secure enough to withdraw, which will be never. The United States presents itself as mediator while acting as Israel's strategic protector, and Lebanon is asked to implement security obligations that its own political and social reality may not allow. So go read this over at The Dissident, the307.substack.com. This is another really good breakdown of the MOU and how it destroys Lebanese sovereignty. And it certainly hands over the entire territory south of the Litani River directly to Israel. That's part of this memorandum. It's not just permanent occupation. It's that will now permanently be recognized, even by Lebanon, as Israeli territory. They just handed away the homeland of their own citizens. Now, we had hope earlier this week. Dave DeCamp reported yesterday that the House was actually going to vote on a war powers resolution to end U.S. support for Israel's war in Lebanon. I think all of this is farcical because, again, if a memorandum of understanding is being signed between the two, there is no war in Lebanon for us to support anyway. Right? So, but as it turns out, Dave DeCamp, anti-war, in the media award honorees, remember, more than 4,200 Lebanese have been killed since March 2nd. One of the main threats to implementation of the U.S.-Iran Memorandum of Understanding explicitly states conflict in Lebanon must end. So, but again, what's Lebanon's motivation to allow for all this? I still don't understand that. Earlier this month, the House voted on a Lebanon War Powers resolution introduced by Rashida Tlaib, but didn't have support of Democratic leadership and failed in a vote, 92 to 324, with one Republican joining 91 Democrats in supporting the effort, right? So they voted again today. So we were hoping that maybe the Democrats would have the balls to say no. Yeah, of course not, because they also get AIPAC funding. What happened? Prem Thacker. Here are 22 Democrats who voted with Republicans to protect Trump's ability to get militarily involved in Lebanon. And let me guess, it's the AIPAC lobby. Yay. It's Latimer from New York who took Jamal Bowman's seat. And, Gottheimer from New Jersey and Steny Hoyer from Maryland and Mike Lee from Nevada. All of these are deeply, Swazi from New York, they're all deeply pro-Israel. Panetta, that's Leon Panetta's brother, by the way. House voted 189 to 235, so it was closer. They got 100 more Democrats this time to vote against funding going forward with Lebanon. But now they're going to get this thing signed, seems like, between Lebanon and Israel, and they're going to turn around to Congress and say, Well, there's nothing left to authorize to request funding for now because they've now got a peace agreement, even though Israel is going to continue to blow up Lebanese people every day with U.S. support and IDF support behind them. Okay. Now, to remind people, Asal Rod, this was yesterday, Monday, the 29th of June. This is just the last 24 hours. Our tax dollars fund a machine of death and destruction. These are 4 headlines she cropped. One is Israeli strikes kill at least 8 in Gaza, including 2 children, health officials say. Another is that Israeli forces kill Palestinian teen in the West Bank, where there's no Hamas, remember, Palestinian Health Ministry says. Third, Lebanon state media says Israeli airstrike hits the south as they're signing a memorandum of understanding. But of course, Israel can just say Hezbollah was there, even if they weren't, and now they're justified. And remember, that's coming from AFP and the Times of Israel. So we know it's pure propaganda. And finally, from Al Jazeera, Israeli forces bulldoze olive groves in the occupied West Bank. Again, all within a 24-hour period yesterday. Fuck Israel. They're land thieves. They're murderers. And they're now being rewarded and pacified and placated and handed more land as reward for all of their maniacal, genocidal behavior. Just disgraceful, man. Just awful. It's depressing to do this, but I don't see enough people talking about a lot of these elements all at once. Maybe one thing here, one thing there, but kind of looking at it collectively. Again, I didn't even really talk about anything that happened in Iran this week. I didn't talk about anything that's happening in Syria. I'm going to mention what's happening in Somalia in a minute because we bombed Somalia for the 69th time this year. Again, that is to build up the narrative of civil war in Somalia, Somalia government unable to handle things, Somaliland partnering with Israel, recognized by Israel, partnering with the United States, willing to take in the Palestinian people potentially, have stated publicly that they would do so. You see how all of this is being set up on the chessboard? Try to step back and take a look and analyze. Okay. I know that was a long fuck Israel segment. Thank you for sticking with me for it. I got a lightning round, GoFundMe's, and we can get out of here. Before we do that, we don't get a lot of super chat revenue. We certainly don't we don't take any sponsor revenue. We rely on you for funding, and the ways to do that are up there, and those are the people who've done so. Get on that board. Contribute somehow. Support independent media. Cash App, $, Indie News Network. co-fi.com/Indie News Network. Over at paypal.me/Indie News Network as friends and family. Patreon.com/Indie News Network. That's monthly. You can also do monthly or annually at IndieMediaToday.com or INNNewsletter.com. Either of those are on Substack. And then our website, self-hosted at WordPress, and that's IndieNewsNow.com. It's the name of the show. It's also a 24/7 news aggregator website. No ads. I set it up, and with all trusted sources that I believe are doing the best to get it right, that are user-funded. And it's a 24/7 fire hose that you should bookmark and make your homepage so you see current news from all these excellent independents every time you open a browser. Okay. Before we continue, let me just jump in and look at chats for 1 second. The watering, okay, so yes, Vicky is back. Welcome back. So you took a break. Watering, harvesting, trimming, and weeding is a backbreaker, but it's for us so I can keep learning. Yeah, I mean, gardening is not for the weak at heart. It is tough. Yeah, I don't know what happened there. That was weird. We had we just lost the fucking stream for a second. No! no, we just fucking lost the stream. But we got it back, thankfully. So you're going to hear that a second time today. Closed Circuit, thank you as well. Thank you for coming. Welcome to the stream. I don't know that name, so that's good to see new people here. You glitched, dozed off. Naybones, that's funny. All right. Connected first time to Bluetooth about 30 minutes ago. Okay, that's awesome. Good for you. Congrats on learning how to connect to a Bluetooth. Okay. I have got a quick lightning round, 4 stories, one video to watch, and then we'll do the GoFundMe's. I did get an update from Words of Will. I think I got one from Cowboy Kitty, who's here, so he can tell me what's going on. If anything new with Natalia. I did add to a few of the GoFundMe's at Fred Edwards' request, because Fred Edward did put in last week and asked me to put a couple of bucks into a couple of GoFundMe's, which I love you, man. I really appreciate that. That's really sweet of you. Okay, before we get to the GoFundMe's, though, everybody's talking about data centers, and a lot of people have picked up that our friend Aaron Brockovich started a data center map and reporting website and organization, which is great. All right. He did write an article at the BrockovichReport.com this week with Suzanne Boothby, the PFAS pollution and the data center boom. There is a link, and that these data centers are utilizing a lot of these PFAS. These are forever chemicals, and that there is wastewater from them. All right. Yesterday, the EPA, the Department of Justice, and the West Virginia DEP announced a $450 million settlement with ChemHours for poisoning the Cape Fear, Delaware, and Ohio rivers with forever chemicals, in some cases without required permits, and in other cases in violation of those permits. Some might call this kind of settlement historic, but adjusted for inflation, that $450 million is worth less in real dollars than the $333 million that PG&E paid in 1996. You might remember that settlement was the one that was turned into a movie with her name on it, Erin Brockovich. That was 30 years ago. That was $333 million. So you think about, it should be $1 billion at 1996 dollars. If you want to get technical, the $450 million ChemHours settlement includes both the $22.5 million civil penalty and the cost of injunctive relief, which is cleanup, clean water supply, and pollution controls. That's just to fix what they did. They're only paying out $22.5 million in civil penalties. The actual cash penalty is much smaller. PG&E's $333 million was a direct settlement payout to those impacted. So they got away with it. ChemHours, by the way, generated nearly $6 billion in revenue last year. Not profit, but revenue. The penalty portion of yesterday's federal settlement, $22.5 million, is what they earn in about 36 hours. So read the rest of this Erin Brockovich article. Next, I've got one about, and she's going to link, by the way, later on, is to, they are planning to make more forever chemicals to feed the AI data center boom, which will, of course, end up in our rivers and streams and lakes at some point. So getting back again, Dave DeCamp, antiwar.com, has been relentless in reporting on the U.S. and AFRICOM's bombing of Somalia. One of few independent outlets, no mainstream outlets are touching it whatsoever. And I remember the Caitlin Johnstone article about curating your news feed a couple of weeks ago. Specifically, she mentioned Dave DeCamp, anti-war, and following the bombing of Somalia, repeated bombing. So what it says here, this is a short one. AFRICOM said the strike targeted al-Shabaab in southern Somalia. Again, this is, Al-Qaeda made up again, probably somebody that we funded and then decided to turn on. I don't know that for sure. AFRICOM said the strike was launched on June 23rd, targeting al-Shabaab about 14 miles southeast of Afmado, a city in Somalia's southern lower Juba region. The command offered no other details about the attack. as it stopped sharing casualty estimates and assessments on potential civilian harm last year. Because why should they? Nobody's holding them to account. Nobody's forcing them to do it. And Trump is backing them not saying so. AFRICOM told Anti-War earlier this week that its forces had conducted 68 airstrikes so far this year, making the June 23rd strike at least the 69th, putting it on track to break the record for U.S. annual airstrikes in the country that the Trump admin set last year at 124. What is all this costing the United States? This is one of the reasons for this $1.5 trillion government. And how many civilians are we bombing and destroying and murdering with all of these bombs? There is a cost in lives. There's a cost in creating future potential people that might want to attack us in the future because we destroyed their village, their family, their whatever they loved. Why? You know why? It's Israel. It's always fucking Israel. On top of the war against al-Shabaab, the U.S. also has been bombing an ISIS affiliate in northeastern Somalia's Puntland region, and AFRICOM said that the last strikes launched there were conducted in early May, though there have been airstrikes reported in the region, including one that killed civilians on May 21st. The UAE is also known to launch strikes in the area, though not nearly as frequently as the U.S. Aren't those like acts of war? Aren't those like war crimes? Nobody wants to report on that. The recent U.S. airstrikes in Somalia come amid an election crisis in the country, after many clans and factions have opposed President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud, the leader of the U.S.-backed federal government, remaining in office following the expiration of his term, sounds like Zelensky, which he justifies by pointing to amendments his government added to the Constitution. That crisis sparked clashes in Mogadishu and elsewhere in the country, and Somali media is reporting that the federal government may be on the brink of war with the government of Puntland, which the U.S. backs against ISIS. This is all very confusing. Bunch of different factions and sides here. The U.S. has been involved in Somalia for decades. Remember Black Hawk Down, and has been fighting al-Shabaab since the George W. Bush administration backed an Ethiopian invasion in 2006 that ousted the Islamic Courts Union, a Muslim coalition that briefly held power in Mogadishu after taking the city from CIA-backed warlords. Al-Shabaab was the radical offshoot of the Islamic Courts Union, and its first recorded attack was a suicide bombing in 2007 that targeted Ethiopian troops occupying Mogadishu. Again, once a people are occupied, resistance is justified. It wasn't until 2012 that the group pledged loyalty to Al-Qaeda. Again, U.S.-aligned Al-Qaeda that then took over Syria? The ISIS affiliate in Puntland started as an offshoot of al-Shabaab and first emerged in 2015. All of these people are hooked up with the CIA. I would bet my life on it. Okay, these are all CIA-backed people. Every one of them. Next. Ryan Knight, proud socialist, I mentioned a couple weeks ago, he came back and he's recording videos again. We talked about Prairie Land and these defendants who were prosecuted and treated as Antifa as the first prosecutions as Antifa in the country. They were indicted and now they were being sentenced, and the court threw the book at them. And you'll hear what Ryan has to say about this. 2 minutes and 20 seconds. Let's hear.
So we're making this video because not enough people are talking about the Prairie Land protesters and the Trump administration's latest crackdown on dissent. So there were 9 anti-ICE protesters that were just sentenced to decades in prison in the latest crackdown on dissent in this country. In 2 federal courts, a group of protesters received unusually long sentences after the Justice Department accused them of being members of Antifa. These 9 protesters were arrested after they demonstrated outside of an ICE facility in Prairieland, Texas, and set off fireworks last year for the 4th of July to show solidarity with the detainees that were locked up inside. Now, a few of the protesters broke away from the demonstrations, and they spray painted graffiti on employees' cars. They broke a security camera, just very minor stuff. Then a police officer arrived, drew his gun on the protesters, and just one protester shot back, hitting the officer in the shoulder. The officer survived. It was a non-fatal shooting. And for this non-fatal shooting, Benjamin Song was sentenced to 100 years in prison.
100 years.
And the other protesters who didn't have guns or fire any shots were sentenced to 50 to 70 years for simply protesting outside of an ICE facility that abuses immigrants. Do you not understand how insane this is? This is an attack on the First Amendment and all of our rights to free speech and protest in this country. These were politically motivated prosecutions to crack down on dissent and free speech. The system knows it is losing control and is vulnerable, so it's trying to protect itself by making an example out of these protesters to discourage others from rising up. The empire sees what is happening in Albania, in Bolivia, and in countries all around the world where the working class is rising up and fighting back against corrupt governments that sell out the people at every turn. So I am begging people to pay attention to this case. We all need to stand in solidarity with the Prairieland protesters. They are trying to take away our fundamental right to fight back against our corrupt government, and these convictions must be appealed.
They must be overturned. They must be appealed. I don't know which judge is going to do that. Again, Ryan's tweet, we live under a fascist state where ICE agents can murder us with impunity, yet we can go to prison for 50 years for protesting. I'm going to get to the one that's the worst of all, which is the 30-year sentence. The unjust sentences of the Prairieland protesters violate the First Amendment and infringe on our rights to fight back against a tyrannical government. Now, you see, Elizabeth Soto, she's the last one on the list. Her boyfriend, her husband, is Des Revo. He was transporting handwritten zines in pamphlets across town to meet them. He wasn't even there. And they included him in this indictment and have now convicted him, and he's going to prison for 30 years for driving pamphlets across town to his girlfriend. But I got more about this. Okay, Will Potter, who I don't know, but this was a good video.
Like these are how I learned to think about politics and protest. For a lot of us who grew up in punk rock especially, these were ways of finding out about social issues not talked about in schools or on the news. But to the Trump administration, these are evidence of Antifa terrorism. In Texas, a judge just sentenced Daniel Sanchez Estrada to 30 years in prison. That's longer than anyone who stormed the Capitol on January 6th. In the Prairieland case,
that was the one thing that bothered me about what he said. Forget January 6th. How about Ghislaine Maxwell? That's a longer sentence than Ghislaine fucking Maxwell, who got 20 years for trafficking children.
The government characterized homemade pamphlets like zines as insurrectionary materials and said that moving them was obstructing the prosecution of anti-ICE protesters. Zines are, of course, protected speech. And as Seth Stern of the Freedom of the Press Foundation put it, these zines are no different than the pro-revolutionary pamphlets that the authors of the First Amendment had in mind when they drafted it. But the Trump administration is chipping away at our rights in the name of fighting Antifa. In September, NSPM-7 classified anti-fascists as domestic terrorists. This 30-year sentence is clearly intended to chill free speech at a time when zines are actually making a comeback. In the age of AI slop, there's something real, made and shared by hand. That's the real target here. Not violence, but speech that dares to challenge fascism, passed hand to hand outside the algorithm, where no billionaire-owned platform can shut it down.
You know, and that's a message that Whitney Webb and that others have been also talking about, which is hand-published material, which they can't censor, which they can't delete from the algorithm and suppress. That's published material. Again, we've seen book burning happening already in Florida heavily under the DeSantis administration. All right. This is a direct assault on free speech and on protesting the government. And this, you know, I read a thing about, like, you know, according to the Declaration of Independence, we should have already started revolting and torn this whole thing up and started building a new government, because this ain't representing the people anymore. So I have one more thing to talk about, further corruption. All right. Which is David Moore, P-Politics from Sludge. Now, Sludge did a thing last week about someone having shares in a thing in SpaceX that turned out to not be true. Look, not everyone hits that out of the park every time. I'll acknowledge that. But I did want to make mention that David wrote this article, Trump's $88 billion Iran war supplemental. Yes, he's asking for another $88 billion to cover the costs that we've already incurred, okay, to cover that and make us whole going forward so that we can continue to fund this shit. All right. Of course, it would reward the contractors that are funding his July 4th bash, which are all the military contractors. Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, coming from the Pentagon budget. Lockheed Martin, RTX, and other Freedom 250 sponsors stand to profit from the skyrocketing Pentagon budget and replenishing of missiles fired on Iran. Okay, so go check this one out again at readsludge.com. I am a paid monthly subscriber over at Sludge. I am a supporter of this publication. It's two guys. It's David Moore and Donald Shaw. The two guys work their asses off. They're very focused on electoralism, I get, but they're also focused on following the money and corruption. And I'm a big fan of their outlet. So support them, support independent media. That's our lightning round. We got through that pretty quick. Support independent media because we need it more than ever. You know how to do it. Cash App, $ Indie News Network, ko-fi.com/Indie News Network, paypal.me/Indie News Network, patreon.com/Indie News Network. Over at IndieNewsNow.com, that's our website where you can get 24/7 news. And then at the Substacks at INNnewsletter.com and at IndieMediaToday.com. Okay. Now we're going to do the GoFundMes real quick. And I just want to bring up Halo messaged me and Will messaged me. And if you're there, Cowboy Kitty, let me know what's going on in chat with Natalia. But we're going to start with Words of Will. I've been talking about Will now for about a month, maybe longer. He said his wife was diagnosed with breast cancer and her job just cut her to part-time, so she can't get the insurance she was supposed to get. Now they're in a really bad situation. All right. So I messaged him this morning. Be like, hey man, is there an update I can share with people? Because people are asking. I did put in a $25 donation to their GoFundMe personally from INN today to help prime that pump a little bit. I'm going to put that in the chats right now for all of you, but I'm going to read what he wrote to me. Thanks a bunch. It's really appreciated. She has her last round of the really bad chemo on Thursday. They think it's working, but they haven't done any scans since the first ones. They don't do that till they're done with the chemo. She's pretty bad off on the chemo and can't really do anything but sleep all the time. He said that he's supposed to start trade school in August for HVAC tech since his college degree is now worthless. They're hoping that the next chemo isn't as bad so she can watch the kids 4 hours a night while he's at school. Trying to get their mortgage paused for a few months, but that isn't looking good. Hoping he can find enough work to keep them afloat while going to school and homeschooling all day. It seems like a tall task, but he's going to try it. He also said that the new hospital does seem to be covering the costs, so they got scammed for about $100,000 by the Medical University of South Carolina, who knew about this program across the street and just refused to tell them because fuck the medical system in this country. Okay, the hospital knew they didn't have insurance and told them that they were their only option in the area until a social worker took pity on them, felt bad after the chemo had started, and finally told them the truth, and they switched her treatment. Even worse. So help Elizabeth. Again, her husband, Will, has been a member of our fam since the day we started INN. And this is what we do here, is we help the people around us who need help. You know, this is solidarity. This is building community. These are supporting the people who were there for us. So if you're able to, please fuck cancer and support these people. Thank you. Okay, next we have Cowboy Kitty. His sister-in-law, Natalia. It's been a year since he started this GoFundMe. And his sister-in-law, Natalia, was routine traffic stop, stopped by ICE, and stopped by the cops. They then called ICE, found that she was an immigrant, and put her, even though she has asylum, in an ICE detention facility, pending deportation. For whatever reason, a judge ruled that she was to be deported, didn't care that she had a letter of asylum, and she's now still sitting in that ICE facility pending appeal. We have no idea when that appeal is going to be. And in the meantime, everything just kind of sits in limbo. She has a daughter, I believe, who graduated high school, so she missed that. And again, we have the GoFundMe here, which, thanks to Fred Edward and INN, we added $25 to today for Natalia's GoFundMe efforts. I just put the link in chat to everyone so that if you are able to and of means and can share and can either share it or donate yourself, every dollar counts. I mean, they've raised over $2,200. That helps, but there's a ton of expenses, of course. A year sitting in a cell where nobody speaks the language, where she's been given inadequate food. It's a nightmare, and they're trying to get her to be willing to self-deport. They're trying to make conditions so unbearable that she just says, screw it, just send me out, anything to not be here. But if she does that, they win. And this is her home now. She left because she was under fear of threat of her life. So, next we have justice for Aspen. Aspen's mother, Halo Benson, and we were all Assange activists in the fight to see Julian Assange freed, which, by the way, this past week marked the 2-year anniversary since Julian walked out of Belmarsh. How free he is debatable. He's certainly freer and able to at least access the sun. We've seen him on a couple of occasions, but we know that he's been gate-kept like crazy. We don't know if he was threatened or if he just decided that he's done with it all and withdrawing, and he's paid his debt to everyone, and now he's just going to enjoy his time with his kids. I don't know. I don't. I know that he's no longer in Belmarsh, and that's what we fought to have happen. Now, Aspen was one of the people that fought to get Julian freed, as did her mother, Halo Benson. They were with Oklahoma for Assange. Halo was famously involved in letter writing campaigns and providing people with self-addressed, pre-stamped postcards that were already addressed to certain congresspeople. Literally, all you had to do was write a little message on it and put it in the mailbox and send it out. I mean, just incredible work. And of course, all of that now had to stop because of this, because she has to put her time, efforts, and money and resources into supporting Aspen's effort. A year ago, little more than a year ago, Aspen went to a music festival in Florida in May. She lives in Oklahoma. She traveled to Tennessee to see her friends. They were all supposed to go to Florida together. While she's in Tennessee, her friends are having a fight. It's a couple. So she goes and stays with their friend for a couple of days who has this RV and is going there. All of them are going to the thing together. At the last minute, her friend and the girlfriend, the couple, decide they can't go. She has a surgery scheduled. They knew they had a surgery scheduled, but all of a sudden she can't go, and they ask Aspen to go with this guy down to Florida to this music festival. They have a great time for the weekend. Everything's great. On the way back, they take this guy's RV home. They get pulled over in Georgia. The cops searched the vehicle and found that the guy she drove there with, the friend of this couple, was a drug trafficker that had mass quantities of illegal drugs on him. Charged her and him with drug trafficking. She didn't know these were in the car. She spent 15 days in a county lockup in Georgia last May. Halo slept in her car in the parking lot the entire time while trying to figure out how to get her daughter out. Halo is autistic. Halo is vegetarian or vegan. The food made her sick. The cops were abusive, especially when she couldn't process. They put her into solitary confinement. I interviewed her. You can learn all about this story. It's horrifying. It's terrible. But now she's facing decades in prison as a drug trafficker, which she is not. She did not do this. It's so sad. Earl, I'm so sorry, man. I'm so sorry. I know, man. It's not about guilt tripping. It's about awareness, and I'm not trying to guilt trip anybody. I totally understand if somebody is not financially able, but I do need to tell these stories because someone needs the help. They're getting no help. So I have a platform to be able to maybe reach someone. Look, Shanda told me that somebody gave her $1,000 after watching our one-on-one because they heard about her story. And stuff like that is why I continue to do this. So there is a link tree for Aspen if you want to watch the video, if you want to learn more about her story, if you want to support her artwork, you can go to justice4aspen.com. And if you can't donate, at least share the story. Tell people about this story because people can't believe it when they hear it. And if they have a couple of bucks, maybe they can actually contribute. And it would mean a lot to Halo. I asked her to increase the amount on the GoFundMe because it had exceeded the $12,500 max donation. What she said was, thank you for reaching out because I checked to see how she's doing. Weird. Now I don't see the goal anymore. Maybe she took the goal off. Things are okay in terms of the situation with Aspen's case. They haven't moved, so we're just in waiting mode, which is good. Literally everything else sucks, and we've really been going through a lot. I mean, I meant it. I meant to up it last time you asked, but I'm super afraid to jinx things. I don't know. Anyway, I'll get it sorted this week. I'm sorry. Don't apologize, Halo. We love you. No, don't apologize. And she appreciates me, and I appreciate her. And again, think about all the people that don't have somebody advocating for them, like Aspen does with her mom. So I love you. I love you, Halo, and I love you, Aspen. And you shouldn't have to be going through this. It's terrible. And hopefully we can get you some help. And then, of course, we have Shanda. It's almost now been 90 days since we lost our sister Shanda. And we've sold some merch from the Shanda Masta Fuck Cancer collection. Put your sunflowers up. Vicky, I believe it was your suggestion last week to make a t-shirt of a sunflower on the front and put this image with her years on the back. And I've now sent that design over to the shirt, to the merch people to get that going as well. Oz, of course, has his hoodie and wears it frequently. And anytime he goes to an activist event or anywhere, he's been wearing it all over. He says it's really comfortable, good quality, and he's really happy with it. I think he got it in pretty large size too. So we can accommodate if you need a really large size. But yeah, you can go to IndieNewsNow.com, click on the merch link, and right at the top is the Shanda Master Fuck Cancer collection. For as little as $20, $19, you get a tank top or a t-shirt plus shipping, and any of the profits, anything over cost, we're going to give to either Shanda's GoFundMe. I don't know if that's still active. I need to find out. If not, we're going to give it to a cancer charity on her behalf. And again, reminding everyone that our sister Shanda is an Indie Media Award honoree, herself, for excellence in live streaming and podcasting. She's incredibly missed, and will not be forgotten. We're going to keep this going. Okay. It wasn't you, Vicky. I don't remember who it was, but whoever it was, what a great idea. But yes, we'll have a sunflower shirt for Shanda. There will also be stickers added. I don't know why they haven't added stickers yet, but there will be some new things added to the merch store, plus a couple of items to the Shanda collection. All right, I know that was a long one. I appreciate and love everybody for sticking with me. I know I do a lot of talking, and I have a lot of stuff to talk about. So I'm going to cut out for the night, but I love you all. Support independent media because we need it more than ever. And I will see you next Tuesday, fam. No! We just fucking lost the stream!
Who are these people?
I guess this isn't such an awful place. Is that what you want?